Did you start that recording already? Oh dear.
Like just barely.
Okay. All right, we'd like to welcome you to the Standards and Assessment Committee meeting today. Let's go around the room and make introductions so we know who all is here. First of all, we have our committee members here. Lisa Cummins is here, and Jennifer Gravitt, and Sherry and Patty from our staff.
I'm the chair.
And Spencer Stokes is on his way, and we'd like to excuse Terrell.
Board members, will you introduce yourself?
Doing an educational visit. And I'm Laura Belknap, and I'm the chair, and let's start right here.
My name is Tamara Daly. I work with the internal audit team here at the USD.
Vince Newmeyer. I'm concerned citizen and work with the Catalyst Group.
Thank you.
Brad A.C., President, American Federation of Teachers of Utah.
Thank you.
I'm Sarah Young, Coordinator for Digital Teaching and Learning here at the Utah State Board of Education.
Thank you.
I'm Tabby Hirsch, a former high school teacher, taught sex ed in California. I'm here and I'm representing Sisters of Liberty.
Sister what?
Sisters of Liberty.
Liberty. I'm sorry.
Liberty.
Liberty.
I've done.
Oh, thank you.
I'll remove
Have
the
the- Maybe it's my problem, not yours. So let's remove
No,
that.
it's the gun.
I have gum too.
I'm Frank. I'm a parent.
Tell me your name again.
I'm Frank.
Hi, Don.
Eric Rohn with the Utah Association of Public Charter Schools.
Okay.
Justin Boston, House District 7.
District 7, thank you. Okay, we're going to start with 3.1, action approval of previous minutes. Do I have a motion?
I move that we approve the minutes from October 13th, 2017.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go to 3.2. We're going to have a discussion with Representative Justin Boston. And hi, Spencer.
Hi.
We knew you'd be here. No, put something on
I
that.
usually sit down here.
That's because Terrell wasn't here, so we moved you up here. So where, I don't know, Representative, do you want to go right here? Because we're certainly not putting you down there.
Okay.
That's ridiculous.
We're just going to put you down,
Yeah.
but not
So-
down there.
Representative Fossen wanted to come and talk to us about something that he's working on, and I'll let him introduce it. So we've given him 5 to 10 minutes to introduce it, and then we have about 10 minutes for questions after.
Yeah, so as many of you know, over the last few years, we've had on the Education Committee a comprehensive sex education bill that has come up. It has typically died almost immediately. I'm in a very conservative district, and I've heard a lot of concern and complaints about that particular bill and comprehensive sex education in general. And as a conservative myself, and as a parent, I agree with a lot of the sentiments that I hear from my constituents. My background's a little unique in that my wife is a women's health nurse practitioner, and for about 13 years has been a sexual assault nurse examiner. So she's seen a lot of things, and she's, we're very open with our kids and the education that we give our kids, and we feel that education belongs in our home, but we also provide them with a lot of education. In an effort to, and I guess another piece of information is that the way that the code is written has really spurred some lawsuits against the state in the past few years. And what we've seen is legislation through the judicial branch, and that they're making changes, requiring changes to the code. It's incredibly difficult for us to go back and make any changes after that, right? Because there's been a court ruling. And so as I look at the code and I look at some of the issues that have come up in the courts, I have a real desire to find a happy medium somewhere where parents who are concerned about their kids getting too much information in the classroom can have the opportunity to train their kids at home. And I also, for those parents who don't want to talk to their kids about sex education, and I understand that there are a lot of them, and they want their kids to be trained by someone else, you know, we can always take our kids to a primary care physician or someone else if we don't want to talk to them about it. But I just thought it'd be helpful to pull a group of stakeholders together and talk. So I had, a couple months ago, I pulled a group together. We had the Eagle Forum, we had Pro-Life Utah, we had a pro-family, pro-life group, we had the ACLU, we had Planned Parenthood, and a number of other individuals. We had attorneys for the state there, and I had a couple of representatives, one conservative and one who would advocate strongly for comprehensive sex ed. So I really just wanted a good dialogue, a good discussion to happen around how we prepare our kids for life and how we avoid some of the pitfalls that they could get into. I tend to feel that we should educate our kids to a point where they can make good decisions. But I also respect parental involvement and parental opt-in. So as we discussed our options, the best path forward that we saw was to create this primary curriculum that is primarily just human reproduction. It's just reproductive health. So it's a reproductive health module that talks about, you know, the basics that they're given in like 5th grade, right? And that would be opt-in still, but it would be centralized at the state level, and it would be online. So the districts could, for credit, make that course available in class and go through that online module in the classroom with parental opt-in. In addition to that, we talked about some other areas where we felt that parents really needed some resources. And those could be like contraceptives, healthy relationships, drug and alcohol abuse, you know, just some other things that in a lot of parents' minds it gets into a little more questionable area. But then there are some parents who want to have their kids get that education. So these additional modules would be essentially a la carte. They'd be individual modules that would all be individually opted in.
At the school? If this is at
No.
school or just online?
No,
me.
Can you ask questions?
No, you cannot.
Okay, that's okay. I needed to know the
I can bring.
Sorry,
I can
sorry,
address
I didn't
that.
rule. I wanted to know the rule.
You will have opportunity. You will have opportunity.
So those modules would be available to parents as a resource at home. They wouldn't be part of this the primary curriculum that would be offered in the classroom. Also for those districts who don't want to offer that, but maybe want to give their kids credit for it for health, they could just allow the kids to take it at home as an online class for online credit. So it gives the districts options. It brings the curriculum into a place where, as a state, we don't put ourselves in as much risk, and it also gives parents a range of options. They could opt out of every one of those options, or they could opt into every one individually. So that's really where I'm coming from. I know that this has been a discussion on the board. As a state representative, I believe strongly in both local control and also the power of our local boards and our state board. So I want to be respectful in the way that we author it, to give the state school board authority and oversight. I just, obviously you've read the state code. We do have things in the state code about sex education, and we need to clean up that section in order to avoid future lawsuits. So I wanted to get your feedback.
Is that happening in the recod, that section?
Is it being rewritten? Mm-hmm. No.
Okay, all right, I didn't know if it was that.
No.
Okay.
So I wanted to get your input, and I want to understand better how, where I need to go as far as the state, the code is concerned, and where you might caution me to, leave things to the board. I mean, right now as it's written, and I can share a draft with you probably in the next couple of weeks. It just gives the board the authority to go out and find a vendor who can create the content, and it's going to, define some of the additional modules. It would use the same parental review process that you have in place today, but it also makes that section of code fairly sterile in that it only addresses human reproduction, and it takes, well, I think what you would see in the final draft is it takes the human sexuality piece out of the code, and the state doesn't address that. So
Thank you.
can I have this?
No.
I have no.
I'm sure there's some questions to be had, and just so you know, just even within this group right here, we have very diverse thinking.
I'm sure
on
we
things.
all do,
So-
especially on this.
So it'll actually be a good discussion to have. So, committee members, do you have questions or comments that you'd like to ask Representative Fossey? Jen?
I just wondered what feedback you had from the various groups that listened to this. Eagle Forum, from the Eagle Forum to ACLU, like what was there, did you have buy-in?
Well, yes. I mean, it was a 2-hour discussion about, and we didn't start with this whole concept
Right.
of a centralized curriculum.
Yeah.
That's what we got to after 2 hours of discussion.
And everyone kind of came to a place of,
Yes, I think there are still, the devil's in the details of the additional modules and things like that we'd like to offer. I don't think anybody wants to go too far, and I think like the Planned Parenthood, ACLU types of groups. We also had Equality Utah there. I didn't mention them. They'd like to see some things that maybe the Eagle Forum and Pro-Life Utah wouldn't want to see.
Right.
So, I think we need to find some balance there still, but as a concept, the centralized curriculum, the online modules, the a la carte features, those were pretty broadly accepted.
How does that conflict with the local control of curriculum?
That's a great question. I have actually talked to a few of the superintendents about that issue because it's a primary concern for me, where we're trying to find this happy medium, but it takes centralizing the curriculum. I haven't talked to any superintendents who are opposed to centralizing that portion of the health curriculum because it's so problematic, and there are so many questions on the part of teachers as to what they can and can't teach. When will they step over the line? When will they get sued? I hear those complaints personally a lot about how our code is written. They're concerned about overstepping their boundaries.
Chair, if I may.
Yes.
I've talked with Judith Reisman, and I've heavily researched CSE for quite some time. And of course, have you received this packet, and all of the stats in here. An article came out in Washington Post that the more you sexualize, the education, the more sexualized the children become. I liken this to the book If You Give a Mouse a Cookie, and it's going to open the door, and centralizing it at the state level is incredibly dangerous. Even bringing this out is incredibly dangerous. For every little small step, this is a win for an agenda that is coming into our classrooms and redefining what a human being is, who we are fundamentally. And this concerns me a great deal.
It concerns me too, and that's why I'm trying to address the issues with constantly being bombarded with CSE.
Well, but I think that argument's always going to be there, but I don't think we should negotiate with that. I think on this specific topic, there is no negotiation. Because of the lawsuit, because we've been told in open meeting when we have board member Wright talk to the attorney from Equality Utah. If you see any problem, please come talk to us first. And they said, no, we like to litigate first. This is about a bullying tactic to get into our schools and an idea that is contrary to the foundation of our state's values and principles of family orientation. And it's a concern to me that if we're not holding that part up and compromising on that, it's going to open the door for everything else.
So I'd like to actually, if I can address it,
Yes.
I'd like to actually remove the sexuality aspects from.
But that's today, that's this session. What's going to happen the next session? Or the curriculum.
And what ground are we going to lose in court over the next few years? That's my biggest question. Because if we continue, I would love to write the code according to the strictest morals of our state. I would love that. I would love nothing more than that. But we will not win. We will not win that battle in court. And as a legislator, I will have no authority when the court decisions are made to reverse those decisions.
And I have a whole bunch of things. Spencer.
So the current statute would be rewritten to include a course that would be simply human reproduction. It would have an opt-in or opt-out. I'm just trying to make sure I understand. Well, so it'd only be an opt-in then. You're saying there would
That's
no
what he
be
said.
okay. And then after that, additionally, there would be various components or silos, if you will, or different courses that they could sign up for to get credit.
The additional courses may or may not have credit associated with them.
Okay.
But they would be a parental resource. And let me give you an example, like contraceptive care, and we actually thought there was going to be a constitutional issue with that module specifically, but it doesn't look like there will be. But contraceptive care would be a module where the parents would be able to opt in, the kids would understand the types of contraceptive care and the effectiveness of those types of contraceptive care that are available You know, we have kids who think Dr. Pepper is a contraceptive.
They do. I'm not kidding.
I'm not kidding either.
I know.
And
It's
the
true.
things that I've heard
It's true.
about it are just mind blowing.
That explains so much.
I have heard, I've seen Dr. Pepper in the junior high. I'm not kidding.
When we have kids who think that, I think our role as parents is to give them, we should be talking to our kids about that. But I understand there are a lot of parents who just won't.
If I may interject,
Wait, were you done?
Well, I was just going to say, I'd like to stick to the statistics and science of contraception. That's it. I don't think we need to talk. I think we need to sterilize the curriculum to the point where we're presenting facts and we're telling these kids, look, if you think Dr. Pepper is a contraceptive care, you have about 100% chance of getting pregnant. And we don't really need to go into a ton of detail after that.
And I completely see where you're going, and it's actually about the only safe way to go if you don't want it to be, if you don't want litigation to create the law.
Right.
I have Patty, maybe you can help me a little bit on this, because it's disconcerting to me that we would create curriculum at this office, okay? And so I agree with Lisa on that. However, there have been some other programs where we have put the parameters of the standard, and we have provided vendors could come in, and then we either picked one vendor or two or three that districts could pick from. So instead of us housing the curriculum, we would vet the curriculum. Does that make sense? But it wouldn't be our curriculum. It would be that it fit the parameters of the standards.
And that gives local control to the
yes,
districts.
and so if you have,
two or three.
yes, so I'm thinking, because I don't want to be in charge of the curriculum, any curriculum, and looking after that, we need to keep that local. So that might be an option to do that.
Sure, no, that's a great idea.
And still handle that. I still have other things, but that would also handle the modules as well. I'll let Lisa, I know she has something else, and then I'll come back.
It's fleeting. Jenny, did you have anything?
Sorry.
I do want to say, I understand the concern, I do, but as somebody who's in the junior high, I just see such a need for education, and so I appreciate your efforts on this.
Okay, it did come back. So we had, Jenny, maybe it was your constituent that said, I need the state to take over and be a parent for me, or else I won't be able to get my kid in
Oh,
that
I
health
did
club.
have somebody,
Right?
I mean, it wasn't quite like that, but.
What you're proposing is having the government expand its parental authority over children.
If the parent approves.
I'm not assuming parental authority. The parents have the opt-in authority. It's the final say.
So just, sorry, Representative Foster, I have a question for you. If this was available to your students, your children, because you're so free in it, would this be a course you'd probably not necessarily take?
I would opt my kids out.
Right, because you would not them in.
Educated at home.
Because you do it at home.
But if I'm a parent that can't talk about contraceptives,
And there are a lot.
I might do that. I might opt them into that.
Or
And especially if I knew exactly what was happening, just like I do in sex education today throughout every district, right? I know in advance exactly what's going to be covered. Hopefully. Okay, by state law, I know in advance what's going to be covered, and I can opt in or opt out.
I like and not because I'm in the online world, but I like that it is a flat presentation. It's not where a student is going to say, well, what about, and then the teacher has to respond to the entire
That's where you get into
group.
trouble.
I appreciate that piece too.
But it won't be. We haven't seen the curriculum yet. We don't know who the vendors are. Second of all, we're also not teaching the morality here. Because apparently it's against Constitution code, whatever, right? We're not teaching the morality part of this. That is a huge part of sexuality, you know, good stewards of who we are, our values, our worth, right? Our, you know, abstinence, what it, you know.
We can teach that.
And I
Right, but
It can still be
it's,
abstinence,
but it's, you know,
abstinence based or abstinence only.
Well, it can be by code, by statute, you know, by code, actually.
And in the modules where you said there's one on like healthy relationships, I think some of those things could be addressed perhaps.
But that could also be part of the standard setting, that at the beginning of every course.
but again, not with who's coming to the table and not when it comes to CSE. It will not happen. It will open the door.
It sounds like to me that we're in charge of that,
Yeah.
Lisa, that we would be
Sure.
in charge of that.
For a year, for a 2, for, you know, when, you know, if you decide to run, or if Jenny decides to run, or if I decide, who's gonna replace that?
But I also say if somebody else replaces that person, then those are the people in that area who wanted that voice to be heard. And you have to allow that republic to happen. And it may not be what I want, but it is what it is. Patty,
So,
keep thinking.
Chair Belknap, if I go back to 53A-13-101.2, waivers for participation dealing specifically with required parental consent for human sexuality instruction, the focus of this conversation really is, and if I read 1A, 1, human sexuality instruction means any course, material, unit, class, lesson, activity, or presentation that as the focus of the discussion provides instruction or information to a student about, then it has a list A through L. That's in statute. So what we're really saying is a parent can opt out, but instead of opting out of all of it, there's resources for each of those A through L that they have access to or not, so that when they're opting out, there's at least resources for them to, or choose not to, or in different ways. Is that really what you're asking for?
Yes. Chair, if I may, for lots of questions. When you talk about reproductive health, does that also include in vitro fertilization? Does that include, you know, that a sperm and egg can be created in a petri dish? You know, how far does that go?
Well, how far does it go today?
I'm talking about in regards to
class.
in your idea of what it looks like.
Those decisions would have to be made
Here.
by the board or legislatively. It's not.
Well,
It's not
I'd like to know what
it's not a
the
representative
group
Boston
is
decision.
thinking. I'd like to know what your group is thinking on how far that's going to go.
We haven't talked about those things in detail. Right now, we're trying to put together a format where we can meet the needs of both sides of the table.
Okay.
So, and if
also,
it did, Lisa, if it did include those things, every parent would have the right to opt out of those modules.
Well,
Right.
they have to opt in.
Right,
They have to
not
opt
opt in,
Right.
right. Yeah. They could just not
every
opt in.
So they're
parent
not
is
going to be
aware.
taught them unless they opt in.
Unless they
correct.
opt in.
But
That's
not every parent is aware and aware of what's going on. And so then the other thing is, the way the standards are set up now, everything is integrated. So what is taught in health class can be taught in English language arts, can be taught in math, can be taught in science. How does a parent opt in when the standards allow that integration, or opt out?
No, that's
They
an
don't.
interesting, but that's an
But
interesting
it is
question,
interesting.
because maybe that's something to consider here, that the merging of different courses,
Mhm.
that this part of the code cannot be integrated into other courses.
I would imagine you couldn't do it because you can only do that when the entire student body is participating, right?
Yeah, but it happens in a class, in a language class,
All the
and they
time,
ask a question and the
all the
teacher
time.
either, and out of all goodness,
Mhm.
might respond, and so that might be something to consider, that in that. I also would want you to think about how far should code go versus what we can do here.
And I would like to
And,
give you as much latitude
and
as
I appreciate that.
possible. On that same note, one of the issues that was brought up, because we've been discussing this for over a year now. Last session, I used the term sterilizing the curriculum to some extent, or at least the code. And I don't want it to refer to human sexuality. I want it to refer to human reproduction or reproductive health. Because when we start talking about sexuality and emotions and feelings and attractions, that's where the problems, that's where the conflicts and the legal challenges happen. And so I think those emotional and sexuality discussions don't happen in the curriculum, should not happen in the curriculum. But the question that comes up when we talk about that is, what about an English teacher who's having their kids read Romeo and Juliet? Can they talk about love? Can they talk about, attraction? Can they talk about those things in the classroom? And that's a question I can't answer right now. I don't know.
Well, honestly, I know that you would like to leave us great latitude, but I prefer that you didn't leave us great latitude in this. I mean, my speech is always, we seem to be the middlemen between the legislature and the LEAs, and they have a lot of authority, and we have minimal authority in the middle. So in something that is this controversial, I represent way more people than you do. And I would much rather get it down on that level, where the people who you represent that have access to you and let this, because this is, I think this is a argument of our time, which is we have to be very diligent in how we're crafting legislation so that the courts don't end up crafting the legislation for us.
Right.
And the agenda and the dialogue and the policy and the discussion, because that's what we saw in this last go around. So, if the legislation is tight on this particular topic and it says these will be this is the fence, we can certainly draft something within the fence, and can do it very well. But on this topic, giving us the fence, I think would keep it nice and tidy so that everybody knows, how it's going to happen. But I agree. I think this is actually a really wise approach to keep it focused on human reproduction rather than sexuality or,
Lisa?
So in California, they now have a third option when a child is born, right? To not place a gender. When we're not placing genders, that a human being, a baby, is created by a man and a woman only, right? That is going to open the door for those pro CSE to say, wait a minute, right? And challenge that narrative when we've got 67 plus gender identities out there right now. to me, this is a mouse a cookie, and I'm not in, I understand the fear of the courts. I think I would hope more people would stand up and just fight this. And not be afraid of the courts. And I understand the courts. I understand that there's fear, and that I understand that the Supreme Court won't even touch this. And that the lower courts are making more rulings over this than they should. But
We have recent firsthand experience
I understand that.
on this.
And I disagreed with it then, and I disagree with it now.
But how would you have approached it differently? I mean, that's the difficulty.
Well, we had the choice as a legislature to not pass a bill.
Yeah.
Right, about that particular issue that came up in the last session.
Yeah.
And had we done that, then the court would have changed it for us. I understand, I totally understand where you're coming from. I have the same fears for my kids and my grandkids. I share your concerns about the degradation of society and the moral decay of society and you know, where the next generation is going to go. I share a lot of the same concerns. I hope you know that. This is not, you know, it's not a CSE conspiracy to get a conservative representative to run legislation to open the door.
Because you would be the guy I would go to.
You're trying, I would say it's just the fence, Jen, and I got you, that you're trying to make it so it's not a revolving door. You're trying to make it a door where you can open, fix it, and close it. Okay.
Two things. Patty and I were just looking where she was talking about 53A 13-101.2. You know, it doesn't just deal with human sexuality. It's dealing with HIV/AIDS, parenthood. Would those be things in the modules?
Yes.
And then
it's already in code.
And it is in code.
And that's comprehensive sexuality. It's what they're trying to push through.
But they would just be in the modules for parents to opt in, right? And then I guess I would be remiss.
But they'd be, to your point, they'd be individual modules,
yes.
right?
So you would opt in individually too.
I could put my kids in an STD or sexually transmitted disease class, but not.
But not in
or a module
reproductive anatomy or human sexuality.
Right.
And guardian.
And I think that we have to, even though it's controversial, I think we have to deal with the reality that kids who are struggling with their sexuality are killing themselves at a higher rate. And
that's actually not a true statistic. It just keeps going on and on.
Well, I've seen some studies.
And it's not all LGBTQ kids.
No, and I understand that. I've heard from some constituents.
We do have a suicide issue.
We do.
For sure.
And I will tell you from narratives.
A tragedy.
That we're not addressing some things that our kids are dying
over. Yes.
They are,
I
and
appreciate that, Jen.
So that's all I wanted to say there.
Okay. I'm going to open it up. We're actually past time, but if someone in the audience has a question they'd like to ask and that's not repetitive to what's already been discussed, I'm happy to have you come ask a question of the representative. Brad? Yes. Come to the table, please, and introduce yourself.
Thank you. Ready, President, AFT, American Federation of Teachers of Utah. As you talk to this group and you discuss the modules, for instance, contraceptives, things like that, did the discussion ever turn? I know I'm hearing in this discussion today that there's a lot of parents that don't want to teach that at home. The experience that I came from inner city Ogden, where many of my students were pregnant, didn't know how long it was for gestation periods, things like that. Was it ever addressed for those intergenerational poverty kids, those things that are it just does not happen at home? Because you're saying these modules will be taught at home. Many of those parents aren't going to take those modules, even know how to do them. Are they going to be written in Spanish? You know, there's a lot to go on with that. So was that ever discussed about maybe cultural things at home, things like that, with those modules going home that they probably wouldn't be taught at home? Where would those issues, that education, be brought up?
So we're not at the level of detail where you are
Okay.
right now, but I can tell you that the modules being online, I mean, the kids would have access, as long as their parent had opted into the module,
Okay.
the child would have access to the module, the curriculum, online. So anywhere they could access the.
And you said the school could give credit for doing those modules if the parent had opted in. So that would also be where they could have a school.
Okay.
support.
And then one more. Go.
Oh, I just say, but your point is many of your students didn't even have access at home.
Right.
For a parent.
Right. One more thing, just very briefly, thanks. As far as curriculum, things like that go, and you're talking about those issues of teachers having to be very careful on what they do, some things that need to be looked at that I'd like to alert the board to is in curriculum, especially AP geography, it talks about population controls, and that is taught in the AP curriculum that has been approved by the state. Had experiences where I had to defend a teacher because they taught populations control with the word birth control. A parent complained about that, and at least we were able to fight at the UPAC level, and it was dismissed.
Brad, would you send something to me
Sure.
on that?
Absolutely.
Because that's a little bit off topic. But
Okay,
but
but there is some
also
things
a
that go
topic
along with
that
this.
would be helpful.
Thank you.
I appreciate that. Okay, come to the table. Just a reminder, ask questions, and also, if it's already been asked, please don't repeat.
Okay,
Please sit down and sit. You're okay.
sit down. Okay. I'm Tammy Hirsch, and I formerly taught high school sex ed. So, and then I know the code, and I've taught it in California where there was comprehensive sex ed. And so my question, what he said, so I don't still understand if you're doing these modules online, are they not doing them in school? Are the teachers doing? Because what you're not understanding is we have a complete, robust, I don't want to use the word comprehensive, but we have a complete, robust sex education right now. And you can write this one down. It's called Utah Administrative Code R277-474-7. Currently, can questions be answered during sex ed? Yes. We cannot be sued. Utah educators may respond to spontaneous student questions for the purpose of providing accurate data or correcting inaccurate or misleading information or comments made by students in class regarding human sexuality. So they can.
That's correct, because that's an opt-in class.
So they can talk about contraceptives. I was able to talk.
In an opt-in class.
If it's a spontaneous question.
If it's a spontaneous question. We taught complete reproductive anatomy and health. We taught the male reproduction first and followed the sperm into the female. Then we did human reproduction. We talked date rape, sexually transmitted diseases, contraception, including condoms. And
Are you talking about Utah or California?
Utah.
Okay, thank you.
And I had to go up to, we do in-service classes, and we learned about, how we could answer the questions with condoms, so we can answer that with our students. And with comprehensive sex ed, what they're doing is they're pushing self-gratification and they're sexualizing children. And I've seen the curriculum, and I taught some of the curriculum, and I've seen the devastation from the curriculum. And with our abstinence-based, I feel it's like
Is that California, or were you saying?
where I taught in California. So I've seen the devastation from using that
They're
curriculum.
not teaching
You're
sexualizing
teaching.
children.
You are. They start very, very young.
Let's be careful what
Yeah.
let's be very clear. California is doing that.
California is doing that.
And how
how
does that?
through comprehensive sex ed, they are teaching, and here I have my little third grader here. They're teaching third graders all types of sex, and they have cartoons on the wall. I was just recently in California, and this was 2 years ago. I saw a man complain because of third grade come home and talked about anal sex. The newsroom came into the classroom, and there on the wall was cartoons of how to show that they liked each other. And one was mutual masturbation, one was vaginal sex, oral sex, and anal sex on the wall. And so what comprehensive sex ed is, they say evidence-based, and that's according to them, or accurate according to age appropriate. Well, according to Alfred Kinsey, who started this, he's a pedophile, and he raped 8-month-olds, and they want to sexualize children. So with ours is abstinence based. We talk completely about sex. Any kids can ask anything about reproduction, date rape, and we teach no means no. We teach, and also on our code currently, we do teach about technology. And it doesn't say particularly in our lesson plans about sexting, but we can add that in there.
Okay,
We
you
need to
have a
add that.
question for the representative.
Okay,
You have a question for him.
my question is why would we want to open the door? Why can't we decide that we do have enough? And if these students aren't getting, I taught up at Hiller First Base area, and we taught secondary virginity as well. If these students aren't getting it, it's in the code. Then we need these parents to be telling the school districts, saying this teacher, this health education teacher, they now have it in 7th and 8th grade, and they have it in 9th and 10th. They have it twice. So they should be able to go to the local school district, and those parents complain and say they're not teaching this. And then they address it that way. We do teach it. And so if they're not getting it, it's because either the principal is not in there. I had my principal in all the time. He'd walk in.
Okay, so what is your question?
So we should not be opening the door to this comprehensive sex ed. It teaches self-gratification and it pushes abortion, where abstinence-based is like the 0 fatalities, the only acceptable goal. We believe it should be 0 teen pregnancies and STDs, the only acceptable goal. And so we already are 46% in pregnancies. And that's not including, if you took out the marriages, there's some.
Can I address your question?
Yeah.
So I think if you look at it this way, that we're taking existing curriculum and we're putting it online, but we're narrowing the general field of what we're educating kids in that, I don't want to call it core because that's a bad word, but in the primary curriculum, we're narrowing it down to specifically human reproduction. And then the things that we're already authorized to teach in the state become additional modules that are opt-in.
Okay.
That's what I'm talking about.
I'd like to go to Jody for just a minute. Jody, can you give us some clarification here?
So I'm Jody Kaufman. I'm the health specialist for the State Board of Education. So currently our core, it is opt-in. It is taught in health class, which is, we have Health 1 and a Health 2 class. Health 1 is taught in either 7th or 8th grade. Health 2 is taught in either 9th or 10th, and that just depends on the LEA and how they break apart middle schools, junior highs, how they do that. Our current core, before it's taught, at least 2 weeks before it's taught, we have the opt-in parent form. And each LEA has a school board that they determine which topics are taught. And that was the form, Patty, that you had the list of the things that can be taught. STDs is included in that. Reproduction is included in that. And so is rape and violence, internet safety, things like that are in that. The teacher would check off the items that they're going to teach during the course.
But let me just follow up by what their board gave them.
Correct. Yes. The LEA board. So, and each board gets, they have, the list is the things that can be taught. The LEA determines what that district or charter will teach in theirs, and that's a board that does that. And each teacher will check the items that have been approved by their LEA, and they send that home to the parents. The parents then have choices. They can opt their student into the entire curriculum. They can opt their student into everything but, and then they'll say, I don't want my student part of ST. Yes, whichever of the things that were checked. Or they can say, I don't want my student part of this at all, period. And then that student is excused from the entire lesson. They won't be tested on it.
Well, by sending nothing back, The student's not included.
Correct. If the parent never gets the form back, then the student won't be included in that. And they will go to somewhere else that's been determined by the school. So maybe the library, and they have an assignment on resiliency or nutrition or something else that the teacher has already determined will be the alternate section for the time frame that they're talking about that in class. Yes.
And following that up, it actually is RG 77-474.
Mhm.
And if we go to 9, that is a parental notification. And going down there, it even gets into the weeds of being able to say that the timeline must be specific enough to give parents fair notice of topics to be covered, allow the parent to exempt the student from attendance for class for even just portions and pieces. And so it's those things are within here. And that was just the possible effective date of November 7th, 2017.
Jody, will you stay at the table for a minute?
Absolutely.
I'm sure that you have more. Yeah, I think that, may I speak for you? Would you mind if she sent you some?
No, I'm happy to talk to you.
Yes, I
Or
would
she
love
could
to.
email you some things?
Because I think it could be, to be able to stop the litigation, the other law that just passed about adding in homosexuality, that's where we have to address that. That's where we have to be able to put that in there, in a way that you meet both people.
Unless we're not talking about sexuality.
Right.
It's just reproduction.
Yeah,
That's
that isn't exactly what the
that's
code
the
says.
key.
Oh,
That's not exactly
okay,
what the code
because
says.
I thought that we have to now talk about it.
No.
That's
Well,
what the
that's
law
why he
says.
wants to change the law
No.
so that it talks
Okay.
about reproduction
Well,
and not sexuality. There's
Yes.
two big differences.
okay, so these
Yeah.
buzzwords.
Yes, really big difference here.
Sexuality now is considered the gender person then. Is that what it is? And
Not
the multiple
necessarily, but
genders?
It's bigger than that. Do you, Jody,
Okay.
you want to answer
Can
that?
I
It's a new,
clarify that
yeah,
for
what
you?
is sexuality now? Let's
Okay.
say
So,
change the
so what
definition.
changed on the law?
Mhm.
The core didn't change. We don't
Okay.
teach anything about homosexuality.
I know now, right?
Correct.
Mhm.
And,
And even after the law changed.
oh,
Mhm.
sorry.
But I had homosexual
Wait just a minute,
students, so
Jody,
I was able to
you-
answer the
wait just a
questions.
minute, Wait just a minute, Jody, we can finish.
So what changed on the law was its advocacy of homosexuality is no longer against statute. So that was taken out. So, but we still don't teach homosexuality. It's not in the core. We don't teach homosexuality. We don't even bring it up. It's not addressed. The difference is it's no longer against law, state law and policy, to advocate for homosexuality. And that's the only difference. So if a student comes and spontaneously says something, the teacher has some freedom there on whether or not they can help the student, or it's the teacher discretion on that. It's the teacher's
Okay,
hands
and
are no
I
longer
think
tied.
we've gone to
Right.
squirrel, because I would like to
Correct.
really come back to
Okay.
human.
And now,
clarify
but now
that
I
question.
understand now
Okay.
what
well,
that meant. Thank
Were
you.
there some others who
clearing
wanted to
that up.
ask a question?
Mhm.
Yes, Vance, do you have a question, please?
Yes, I
Come
do.
up and state
Thank
your
you
name.
for answering
And
that.
really, we are way over time, like,
This is never a quick discussion.
I will try to be concise, but nonetheless, there needs to be some understanding. We today face a lot of challenges with our standard, what has been considered the standard morals of the state, and what is happening now. With the Supreme Court decision on homosexual marriage, there's a lot of legitimization that is being trying to be pushed into many areas, schools particularly, for homosexual relations, etc. And when you have, you talk about these opt-in modules, we've heard discussion about how there is, if a child is not opted in on a certain thing, they're sent to another little purgatory room or something like that, And the challenge is I have seen some of the comprehensive sex ed materials that have been promoted by organizations such as Planned Parenthood and so forth. And they are downright pornographic and very irreverent when it comes to sexuality and so forth, and offensive, plain out offensive. Now, I like what you're doing in that you want to have these modules which people will opt in for. One of the challenges I see, and something that I'd like to hear you respond to, is so-and-so down the street has, their parents have a very different idea of sexuality, which may include homosexuality or whatever. And they opt in. They're now bringing these lesson materials home. And as I mentioned, some of these materials are very, very stimulating to young minds who have not been grounded, if you will. And there will be all the tendency for little Johnny down the road to say, hey, come over to my house, you ought to see what I'm looking at. You ought to see what I'm being taught. And so how are you going to address those types of concerns with parents who have a totally different perspective on morality and sexuality, etc.?
Yeah. How do you keep little Johnny from bringing his buddy in and pulling up a pornographic site?
Now.
But I think that's a different argument.
But what's sanctioned by the state?
I hear, well, but the sexuality would not be in the curriculum. The sexuality would not be in the curriculum. The reproductive health would be.
With the comments that we've heard here that we cannot have a moral position on homosexuality, etc., I cannot see that it will remain separate. Certainly not for any length of time.
All right, thank you, Vince. Did somebody over here have, yes?
I actually have a question for you.
Will you please come to the table?
Well, it's very quick. You might not even want.
Okay, but introduce yourself.
I'm Dawn Francis. So I'm not here to speak on this issue. Didn't even hardly realize it was here. I'm here for a later piece to say thank you. But I am on the Health Standards Committee, and so I do have a question that may, just some feedback from that may play into what's there. If you'd like to hear it, I'm happy to say so, but you are already out of time.
Actually, you know what? If you'd work with Jody and then send that, and I think Representative Fossen would probably like to see that, and the rest of the committee, and send your comment, would that be okay?
Yeah, however you want to do it.
That would be lovely. Thank you so much. Thank you. All right, are we okay? Now, committee, do you have any other questions for Representative Fossen? I know this is going to be, he is going to be bloody soon, and this is just one little meeting. Would you? Yes.
Just out of Illinois, there was a former Planned Parenthood worker, and she said the only way that we are going to increase abortion is to teach sex education. Just so that we're aware that this is opening a door, and we need to. I'm not in favor of this, but I am asking extreme caution.
Lisa, I'm in no hurry, and I have a bill file open.
Mm-hmm.
We could address it this session. We could just as easily work on it next year. I'm in no hurry. If we're not getting it right, and if we're not coming generally to a consensus as a group of stakeholders, I'm in no hurry to push anything through. I have no interest in that.
Thank you.
I think what you're doing is genius, and what you're doing is you're talking about reproduction rather than sexuality, and teaching the science of it, and that's it, and getting away from all of the other subjective things that everybody else wants to talk about. I think you can do this in, I don't know that I'd use the word sterile.
Yeah, I know. I
but
using that word.
I'm trying to find medical
way,
Yeah.
in a science clinical medical way, that
Okay.
What's the word?
Medical.
In rural, they use the term medical.
Medical. We're so smart in rural.
Aren't we though?
But I understand it's a massive hornet's nest. We deal with those here all the time. But I do believe that we are 100% protected because no one is going to get taught this at all, any of it, unless a parent says they can be taught that. And I think that's the appropriate approach.
Thank you.
Just quickly, but to clarify, in the classroom it would be reproduction, but on the modules, because of code, there would be human sexuality.
Well, the code can change.
No, I know, I'm trying to clarify the statute,
Yeah.
change the words.
I'm not.
So that, we don't know about that, and then what grade?
I don't.
We don't know that either.
Well, I don't know that either, but I don't plan on making
That wouldn't be
changes to,
Okay, so right now it's eighth grade.
Yeah.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
may I ask you that maybe Jody would be a good resource because she's kind of living it, and
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you'd like to have any of the committee or board members to work with you as well, Patty, that would appreciate the opportunity at the table.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative.
Thanks for being here.
Now you can breathe again.
I'd just like to say that you're the only agenda item that gets all bold, all up.
I know.
Thank you.
All right, let's move on to 3.4. It's informational report on the digital teaching and learning qualified grants. And we actually, I've changed, and Sarah will make a report to us now every quarter. So we can actually consider her done for the year. So then you can come sometime in January, February, or March. And then again, somewhere when something kind of exciting happens, or Sarah, but I would like to just make one caution too, that I would like you to bring something if we have a disaster brewing as well.
Sounds good.
I think that would be important, and maybe not wait if there is to say, what would you like to do about it?
Sounds great.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay.
So,
Introduce yourself.
Pardon me, thank you. I'm Sarah Young, Coordinator for Digital Teaching and Learning. My one program update, because we actually updated you pretty recently based on when the board meetings were, is that the team at USBE had the opportunity to meet with 4 individuals from the legislature, specifically Senator Howard Stevenson. We also met with Senator Adams, as well as Senator Hilliard, and finally Representative John Notwell, who's the sponsor of this particular bill. They had asked for an opportunity to meet with our evaluator. We brought our external evaluator, which is Materi Group, to do a presentation and answer questions, as well as we had representatives from the Learn platform there talking about the formative assessment tool that we're using with LEAs to help give them feedback in regards to where they are in the process. The meeting went well. We appreciated the opportunity to bring those leaders to meet with our evaluators, have the chance to ask questions, and move forward with that effort.
Well, how was it? How was the conversation?
It went well. No, it was really positive. I think that the questions that were asked were really well put, and were relevant to the program in terms of moving forward. Everyone, I think, brings a slightly different lens and expertise to the table. So Representative John Notwell clearly has a lot of knowledge in regards to software applications, how we're utilizing kind of some of those efforts and looking at those pieces. So he had a lot of really thoughtful questions about how we were supporting LEAs in regards to making sure they were fiscally responsible, as well as responsible in regards to data.
Thank you, sir.
Sure. So my LEA shout outs, I'll go real quick. We have LEAs being recognized all over the place. So I'm just going to give a couple of the highlights, but I don't want to say that these are the only LEAs. They're just the ones who've communicated with our office most recently. So the Learning Council
which is a group that looks at education best practices on the national level, has recognized Logan City School District as one of their top 10 digital districts across the entire nation. And so they're actually out there right now having an opportunity to be recognized for their efforts moving forward. Their technology director, David Long, is also in conversations with Education Week in terms of putting together an article talking about their fiscal model for sustainability. So we're excited for that. Moving on, we have Beehive Science and Technology Academy, who was recently named an Apple Distinguished School. We were really excited for them in regards to the fact that they're one of the few schools in Utah who have received that recognition, and it's basically based on the way that they utilize Apple products to be able to improve learning opportunities for kids. Next up, we have Juab School District. Juab School District was one of 5 school districts that was selected by Ed Elements as a winner for the Personalized Learning Challenge. So looking at how are they approaching personalized learning, and then as award winners for that, they have opportunities to bring in professional learning for their teachers at no cost to them, because that was part of their award. So excited for Juab. And last but not least, we're going to be bringing these girls in so that you have a chance to meet them early next year. But we have 4 students from the state of Utah who come from Mountain Heights Academy, who were recognized at the State Ed Tech Directors Association meeting as the Student Voices Award. So these young women collaborate. They're actually from different parts of the state, and they collaborate through their online coursework with Mountain Heights Academy to be able to create a collective impact project around, it's called Operation Bee. And it's about creating bee opportunities for bees to build nesting sites in different places around Utah to support some of the concerns around bee population. It's a national application, and to have our young women from Utah, along with their families and their teachers and their director, highlighted at this national organization was really exciting. Wait till you meet these girls. They are adorable, incredibly intelligent, and you guys will enjoy their presentation.
This is the same school that Aubrey Overton comes from.
Is that right? Mm-hmm. Okay. Are they going to make a presentation to the board then?
We're looking at January, February. We're just coordinating with the girls and their parents and the school.
And you're working with Emily?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Any questions from committee? Any questions from the audience? Sarah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay.
I think I'm next.
Are you next? I think you're next, Sarah. Okay. Wait, I gotta put my glasses. Okay, 3.5, K3 Early Intervention Software Evaluation 277496.
Correct. So we submitted the report that was put together by our external evaluator. This is ETI in this particular case, in regards to outcomes, both related to usage and linked to student data outcomes for the K3 Early Literacy Software Program. That report is presented in full, also with an executive summary at the front. I am happy to answer any questions you may have about that report.
This is the one we talked about quite a bit yesterday in our meeting. Yeah, and so no, I won't ask a question. Anybody have questions about this report? Anybody in the audience? Thank you, Ms. Sarah.
Perfect.
All right, we are on to 3.6. It's an information item. It's an update on the underage drinking prevention advisory. 3.6, I just have to turn to it. Okay, it's just an update on. There's a group meeting, and they have you met one time, Lynette? Is that yes? How many times you've met? And maybe what some of the members and some of their thoughts are. Does anyone have any questions that they'd like to ask on this? It's just an update of where they are in their meetings. Any questions? Anyone? Oh, Lisa. So Lynette, will you come to the table, please, and introduce yourself? You don't have to sit clear down. You can sit up close.
You can sit on the table.
When at Chase, I was the substance abuse prevention specialist.
So with the recent change at the state board, or not state board, at the state legislature for the 0.5 decrease, is that being integrated into the curriculum or the council underage drinking? Is that being talked about?
Right now, we are just sending out an RFI to find out what is out there. I would assume that would need to be addressed.
Okay.
Good. They're just barely starting.
Yes.
Okay.
They're like just this big.
But we did talk about that.
We did.
At our last meeting.
Did you? Okay, good. Thanks, Jen. All right, anybody else have questions? Thank you so much. I don't think, we're just receiving the information. So thank you, Lynette. Okay, let's see, 3.7, we are on 3.7, Board Policy 3002, Standards Review Committee. Okay. So, this is remember last month when we talked about having a shorter review committee for courses that were not core courses and or required by statute. And so this is the setup. It's still, you can, just as a reminder, even in our 11 quote unquote 12-step process, we can always reverse. We can always say, we want you to come back again, or we want it sent out for 90 days. No, we want you to send it out for another 30 after revision. So it's not in ordered. It just keeps us going in and order. Okay. So do you have any questions on this? I actually really appreciated the changes. Yeah.
And some of the changes were based on specific to policy 3002, which is what the review committee is doing. So that's kind of the changes that are listed in the draft that you see on there. So the draft on there speaks to, and here's Diana and she's on her way into, just speaks to the number of times being met and the type of recommendations that will be made. So if you look at the draft, it kind of just goes over some of those things about the work of the committee, especially.
Well, and I really appreciate it because it for the first time, all standards are coming before us. Before they weren't. And so it's a quick turnaround. It could literally turn around in a month, which is fine, but now we have seen them and what they are. And so I really appreciate Diana's work on this. So do you have any questions on this new process? Anyone in the audience have questions on this process? Yes, come to the table.
I just is this the one about phys ed and the arts?
No, ma'am.
No, that's the next one.
Okay, anybody have any questions on this? Diana, is there anything else you want to? Yes, oh, please come to the table.
Okay, thanks.
Introduce yourself again.
Okay, Dawn Franson. So I'm on the health committee on the standards review that we're doing right now. And I just wanted to say thank you to Diana and to Angie. I know, I knew her when she was Angie Oaks, so I almost said that. So that's what my hesitation was like.
We go way back.
Wait, that's the wrong. Anyway, so when that committee was put together, when the idea of that was put together, you have parental voices and you have teachers who are in there together talking about what's the best practices here. And so I was very, very interested in what happened in there and very appreciative at how quick the response was to, wait, we need to make a few adjustments here so that we actually have time for both those parents and teachers to be able to talk about, because really, parents and teachers are the boots on the ground. We, as you know, have a lot more to say about what's there. So that was it, as I just really appreciated their it was really fast. Things like that don't happen very fast.
I also appreciate, because it was actually Member Cummins who said we need a process because it was kind of haphazard and the science standards in 6 to 8 got caught in the middle of this process where the new standards are open, it won't get caught, and I'm hoping that comes true, that the parent and teacher voices are heard more because we now have this process.
Can I just take 2 seconds and kind of address what he was talking about with his modality? Because what the teachers there, I said to one of them, and you'll remember this, there was a teacher who's clearly, like, she's on top of it. She knows what she's doing. And I said to her, how in the world do you manage all of this? She said, it's so hard. We just can't do it. And so, in that format, I'm wondering, after listening to the representative, if it wouldn't be possible to have fewer standards and more options within the standards. Because there were people there who were, like, there was one gentleman there, I don't remember his name. Do you remember? He was sitting, like, over in the corner over there, and he said, in the neighborhood where, I know, maybe when I tell you, then you'll click it. What he said was, so in the neighborhood where he lives, he said, we don't really need to talk about college prep, which is a component in the adult, grown-up behavior, whatever it is called, in the sex ed curriculum, not the sex ed curriculum, sorry, that's in my head. Health curriculum, thank you. He said, we don't really need to talk about it in my neighborhood, but in the school where I teach, it's critical. And so if those boxes there were more options within the health standard, fewer standards, more options within them, then the teachers could select. Now, I don't need to cover this. I don't need to cover the sex ed as much. And by the way, sex ed never even came up as an option on the board that we were discussing as to what needed to be
I'll be really interested to see what comes out of this group. So I appreciate you taking time to come here to say thank you.
Well, that's why I'm here. That is my reason for being here, was just to say thank you.
And especially taking time as a parent to come here.
But those of us who have history with Dawn know she's very polite and that she would come and say thank you.
You should come to everything. Yeah. If I had the true time, I would, but I don't have time, and so just know that it's that much more of a, like, I can't tell you how appreciative I am of the fact that you would just say, you're right, we do need to pay attention to this. And Jody, so even, this was my favorite. We had the original meeting. I'm hurrying, I know you're in a hurry. The original meeting was scheduled for the 31st. And there were a couple of moms in there who were just like, that's all meeting. It's a parade. And there, the professionals were like, the what?
Yeah, that's most important.
But that's what they were willing to accommodate, was the parade.
Yeah.
They weren't making those parents divide between, you can't bring cupcakes and not show up.
And we're ahead of schedule now, I think. So. Right.
So see how fast we are?
We're doing great.
So you can keep
you're
talking.
doing great. Thank you, Dawn, and thank you for coming. It says, our recommended action is considering amending board policy, but that's just, we need to have a motion. So can I have a motion on this? Lisa, did I just get that motion?
You just got that motion.
To
I do it. So how do I need to word this?
That we
adopt
the 3002 board policy.
That we adopt the 3002 board policy on the standards from the standards review committee.
And can we do it and send it to the board on second and final reading?
And can we send it to the board on second and final reading?
There's no reason to not do second. Okay. Any discussion to that at the table? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Thank you. Okay, now I am totally in love with all of you, but I'm taking 3 minutes before we start the next subject because there will be no getting up through the next subject. Because are we on to 277700? And literally 3 minutes. Okay?
And is love, is that something that can be taught?
Yeah, and I don't know if that's going to be
Spencer, I don't know. But if you need to take a quick break, now's the time because it won't be happening.
We can talk about love with Romeo and
Okay.
I mean, if that is love.
24 hours. You all have the parents at Utah. I'm good, how are you?
So my
Question is, should I go back to my committee? There's 2 rules, here and one there. Which one is it more? Sorry.
So here's my question as you're walking.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know, maybe you take early.
No.
They're posted about, they're just posted on Mojo.
Excuse me. You're fine, I just didn't want to make some motion that you would misinterpret.
I like where you want to do it earlier than that, and so is what that took about like just exercise. Mine, yours are probably better. Nutrition. Not like, here's the plate, here's the this is what's in that cell jar. Oh, yeah. All right, my iPad's broken, so I have no. Your what's broken? Or my iPad. Oh. Oh, morning. And so, anyway, I'm looking for
I just got one this morning as a
that's what
kid.
I'm talking about. This is the concern that we're coming
Your son.
Because you know what I mean? No, because this is what this is our list of our
She's good, and I always have her. And it's fine, but it's just like,
not just.
now my kids are gonna have, I mean, not that, I think the 8 will be fine, because
I love
hopefully I made it foolproof.
Oh, I'm sure you have,
But, you know, it's just, they're gonna take more advantage.
Yeah, of course they do.
So that's how they waste it. It's okay.
Outreach tools for parents.
It's fascinating.
It's what it is.
It's fascinating.
We want auxiliary. We want a little bit more.
I'm like,
Where would we go?
should I find it? Call down.
Yeah. That would be good. That would be good. I'm in a. Oh, you I did a syphilis camera master.
Yeah.
And sugar did?
Yeah,
sure.
you know, I liked it.
Just take the test. I kind of do like it.
Because
That's not that because we're talking about, you know, they don't understand. So what I'm gonna do is test. Education, we understand that. So and what's, this is form Jones do it. It's, here's how it works. Sugar, yeah. What doesn't work in my brain. Oh, and it also works with health.
Isn't it fascinating to finally know what these things make sense now? So it will set my life.
I'm not that good at it, but I do like it.
Oh, I'm sure you like it. I'm not an 110%.
I know that sounds bad. Have you been getting a lot of input on the subject?
You know what, this
I
time,
have
are
so
you on
much.
700?
Yeah.
I have over 50 emails just in the past 3 days. So all of a sudden I was like, oh.
See, that's the
Me
thing,
too.
that then,
Mine have gone.
that there's no option for
change.
this is
And
not
it's so much.
parents who think,
Because we can't send this back. We can't.
so it's roll it back down to local control.
Do you guys like
Then you have
the amendment that Brittany sent you?
there is a
Have you seen that?
problem in the school, then maybe we need to talk about
I just wondered what
this is
she
to your brain.
wants to put it back.
Instead of, don't stack,
You
don't
could
do that,
have-
don't do that.
you
Well,
could
what's
have-
that?
yeah.
But when they say don't do it, they're like, well, what is it? And if I say to you,
I feel like
eat
we
this
just,
apple,
we make
and
sure
don't
it's
eat
clear
this.
that there's a way.
exactly, your brain needs
Oh, why do we need to change it?
Yeah.
And then also, and
And every time, there's all kinds of stuff, so when you say don't do it, you want, that's where you end up don't brain. He walks around all day saying, don't eat this.
I spoke with Travis briefly, and he said, I'd just love to sit down with you.
I know you are.
I kind of talk through some specific issues on the licensing, so we get more addressed on the front end and not too far on the legislation, which I'm guessing is already being drafted.
It's,
Right?
the legislation doesn't have much in it. It's gonna be the rule where all the details are.
So all these, so I'm not worried about the legislation.
Okay.
Because really what it puts into place is associate professional and LEA specifics, and it doesn't say anything, like it doesn't have the details about what they are. That'll all happen.
Okay, well, that gives you
So
time
it gives us
then.
time.
Okay,
Right,
that's
when
good
you
to
said
know.
that, when you were at the table, I was like, oh yeah, there's already a draft.
Oh.
I think the draft legislation is the next
We've on the phone quite a
yeah. So watch there for it, like I haven't seen the final version of it yet, but watch there, I think it'll come up pretty soon. And you'll see there's really what it does is remove a lot of the details from the statutes.
So maybe right after Thanksgiving, I'm traveling the next 2 weeks for work for Thanksgiving, but sit down and kind of talk through some of these specific things, I think would be really helpful. I understand that the draft is what about, it's a draft, right, that was a
Right, it's
point
something
for
to-
conversation.
yeah, exactly.
So it's hard to know if these are things that, yeah, we absolutely want to pursue it this way, or this is, so there, I might have more concerns than I need to, maybe just
What was on board docs, because the board hasn't had much time to talk today. So that's kind of.
Okay, are we ready to read? Was it?
No, okay. Which will probably. Are we doing this one? I am staying here, right?
Okay. Just as a quick follow-up on this, we had this rule before, and it passed out of committee, and we sent it to the full board, and it passed the board. But there were a lot of questions and comments on this. And just for the audience sake, today we are not going to do another hearing. We have had a hearing on this that was 3.5 hours long. So the discussion will mostly be kept at this table. And I'm not trying to be rude, I'm just letting you know. However, if there's clarifying questions that you need to have, I'm welcoming you to ask those, okay? Because we are going to take a while on this subject, okay? I don't know, Diana, if you want to present anything to start with?
I don't think so. I mean, we've presented it several times already. I think because you've had the hearing, you're well aware what the issues are. I think it's really for you to grapple with, and I'll take notes.
Okay, note lady. And just to be clear too, for this, it's interesting too that the vote at this table was split right in half. So that's why the conversation will be so great, because we're not seeing things exactly the same. And I think that's great. Okay, so, all right.
Can I just say one thing before we start?
Please.
So last committee meeting, I asked that we put the action items at the top of the agenda.
Oh, you know what? We moved this one because we didn't know how long it would take us. That's why we moved this one.
But we can always abandon informational items, right? If we run out of time.
Yeah, well, they didn't take very long.
I know, but I'm just saying.
I know.
Because I'm going to be leaving at 11:30.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, well, then you have this amount of time to be first.
Right, but I'm just saying.
Okay, I appreciate that, and I remember that you had told me that, so I will remember to keep the heavy discussion items at the top.
Yeah, that way, if we have to give up on something, we can give up on the informational items.
Okay, I appreciate
But
that.
Since you say we're going to be here forever on this one, I thought I'd.
Well, we might not be forever, because we may be able to come to consensus on a few things and move. A couple of the things that I have received over time is that why are you getting rid of health and eating? which we know at this table is not true. We're not getting rid of it. It just is not being as a requirement from the state. Now, you will also know that you, anyway, I'm going to turn over committee for comments and questions. Because I have my own, but I'm turning it to you. For discussion. Jen,
Where do we start? Well, just so I know where to take notes, are you going to be working from the?
We are working from the.
You're not looking at that one, thank you.
We are working
That's what I
at
needed
what
to
was
know.
passed.
Sherry just got me straight, I'm
Yes.
fine.
She's clear now.
Stop me if we need to move the discussion in a different way, but I think that we have a clear message that we can't keep what we have. I think we need to do some changes. And even though we're not getting rid of health and we're not getting rid of art, the perception is, and I heard this from multiple districts, we cannot do something different than the state is set out. And so we will no longer require these things, even though some districts want to. I had several districts say, I don't want to go against the state. That's how they see it. So that's the perception. I don't know about the emails you guys have gotten, but I've had 50 plus in the past 3 days with all of them saying, please return to what it was before. Maybe strengthening the waiver process so parents know they can waive classes for their kids and allow more flexibility so it's still parent choice, but to completely get rid of 700. That's the feedback I've got.
And I'll tell you that I don't know where I believe with what the districts are willing, if you're not requiring them, we will not offer them. I think there are the larger districts that are saying we'll keep them, but I think many of and I shouldn't even say larger. I think the top 4 or 5 districts will keep them, but beyond that, I don't think it will happen. So I have had a complete conversion on this. The other way, I think I voted for this the first go around. I didn't.
You didn't. You said it wasn't ready for prime.
In board meeting, but in committee meeting.
Yeah, that's
when we were in committee.
Okay. Oh,
That's correct.
So from a committee board, for committee meeting, I voted for it. But the more I've had conversations with people, the more I believe, like you, Jennifer, that and maybe the topic of conversation needs to be around the credit hours, but still offering all of the courses. And so however we want to split that fine line of what we can do to still keep everything, maybe because in our current draft we've actually taken out all of the credit hours. We've gotten rid of all of those.
Right.
And I'm wondering if leaving the list intact and taking away the credit hours might be a happy medium, or saying X number of credits in any of these suggestions.
What if you did something, and this is actually from the version 2, version 1, that you say at least 2 of the following courses that they would have to take. And that's what it says now. And we keep that in there, that they have to take at least 2 of the following courses, and keep the Carnegie units out, but allow the districts the opportunity. They might not be able to teach the world languages. That's one of the complaints that we hear a lot from the rural schools, that they don't teach a world language in that grade. So I'm trying to think, is it line 136, Spencer?
Well,
do we still have lines on ours? We don't have lines, do we?
No.
On version, on the original, do we?
Which is something that would be super helpful. I mean, I've noticed this. I noticed this when we go from draft to rule, we get rid of the lines, and so it's harder, the line numbers, so it's harder to talk about during a full board meeting, because you're trying to, where is that again?
So can you tell me where mine, it is, 705, dash 5, and it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 4E, I think it is. Did I find it right?
That's right.
Okay, and change that to be something along the lines of two courses. At least 2 of the following arts courses.
Okay, so.
Chair?
It's not your version one, are you?
I do have the right version, right? Because my 4E is not what it doesn't match.
Mine doesn't match.
We can't make it match.
Yeah, 4E would be grade 7 integrated science.
Okay, so we just have to I have to find it. Yeah, that would be helpful.
You can do that, Patty?
Magic. That's magic moment.
Chair, may I ask a question?
Yeah.
So I'm trying to understand, without finding it in here, what you're actually trying to accomplish, because the requirement to have at least 2 arts courses was a requirement to LEAs to ensure that they would offer a variety. It was never a requirement for students, not here nor in the previous version, that they would take 2 different arts courses. It was only 1. So I wasn't sure, when you started talking, I thought you were talking 2 of art, health, digital, but I don't think that's what you're talking about. So if you said 2 of the following for arts, you're actually increasing the arts requirement over what it used to be. I just want to make sure you knew that.
A student in grades 7 through 8 is required to complete the course described to be properly prepared for transition to 9 through 12. The following are 7 through 8 general core requirements. Grade 7 language arts, grade 8 language arts, grade 7 mathematics, grade 8 mathematics, grade 7 integrated science, grade 8 integrated science, and then Utah history, and Utah state history and Utah history, right?
United States history and Utah.
Yeah, sorry, thank you. And then this is where I was thinking to add at least 2 of the following arts courses.
Which would be an increase, because you'll notice in what's crossed off, it was
Yes,
one
but here's my
unit of credit.
question. What else are they going to take? They're in 7th grade, they get dropped off at school, they don't go anywhere.
Well,
they're not like high schoolers that can travel and move.
Right, but are you still eliminating PE, health, and everything else then? I mean, so that's what I'm saying is right now.
It's not under the core requirements. It comes up, now it comes under a different letter, under elective.
I feel like we're not
communicating. Yeah, if they take 2, they're not going to be able to bill their health, their CTE, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
So it used to say 1 credit of art. And when Brittany did her revision,
but it lists them here. It lists them here. Visual arts, music, dance, theater, physical education, health education, college, career, and
yeah. So are you saying 2 of all of those?
Yes.
Okay, that's the clarification, not just the arts.
So right. So the arts are listed. I always miss the old-fashioned way when it was you could see the subset. So the 4 arts, which should actually probably be 5, which would be something we could fix, would be all a way to achieve arts. But then you still would have health, you'd still have PE.
But you wouldn't make it an art
it isn't an art credit. That's what I'm saying. See, notice
I'm
how
just saying,
PE is
okay,
F.
at least 2 of the following courses, take the word art out of there. At least 2 of the following,
It
at
doesn't,
least 2 of the following courses. Visual arts, music, dance, theater, physical education, health education, culinary technical education, and digital literacy that starts in 2018.
So you lump them all together.
but PE and health and those are not arts courses.
I didn't say art. 2 of the following courses.
Well, that would be.
Are you down on number 9? Or am I not looking at the right document?
Click on the board.
No, she's talking right here.
Okay, so it doesn't say 2 at all right now.
Right
No,
now.
it doesn't.
So, okay, got it.
So she's talking right there and changed it to 2.
I don't know, I'm trying to think of something.
I'm not being critical, Laura.
That's what I'm trying to, I don't know.
I'm just like, how would that change it?
I don't know.
Well,
Because then they could still not see help.
but the difference is, yeah, that's true. If it's
Yeah.
2, they have to take
PE.
2 credits of the following.
Because they have to do that anyway. with
But
700.
so personally,
It'll work perfect.
I just think that I think that health is a component that needs to be taken.
And so is art, and so is PE.
But my point is
Yeah, no, I know.
that if you say health at .5, and then you say you can take any of these, I actually don't think PE needs to be taken, but you can go ahead and think that. I'm okay with that.
Oh, and I'm okay with you.
Yeah. So at least you leave in the .5 and then you can take anything else from the following list. So a person who doesn't want to take PE can take, more arts courses, but that health is a required half-credit course.
I find that disconcerting as well. I would go back to Representative Foster. He would opt his kids, he wouldn't opt them into any course like that because they teach it at home. And now we're telling them they have to have it.
But they
Well,
can
what
still.
do you think?
Well,
What do you think is taught? What do you think is taught in health? Because what I think is taught in health.
It's not about what the course is, Spencer, for me. It's about what we're requiring for us, that we're demanding a student and a parent, that a student has to take it. I like Jenny's comment, and I've been mowing it since she made it, or in the very first sentence.
Yes.
How can we make these types of things, even if we make them all required courses, more waivable?
Yes.
I'm mulling that.
And I will tell you that.
Because Jenny, not just you, Jenny, sorry.
No, you can.
All districts are not created equal, and all schools are not created equal, and some students are really suffering because they're being forced to take the courses because we're requiring them. And I could give you many examples, but.
I'd like to hear at least one.
Okay, my concert violinist girl had to take a basic music course.
She could have waited.
She tried.
Really?
That's my
Okay.
point.
So we
She
need to
tried.
So
Okay.
I'll give you my personal horror story. PE taught in, let's see, 9th grade at the junior high. My daughter was told that she should take it her last hour of the day so that she could go run with the high school varsity cross country team. And she got the only blemish on a perfect 4.0 record was for attendance at her PE class, because she was told to go run with the cross country team. Now, you're telling me that she's getting less physical education in 9th grade than she would be on the varsity cross country team, and went on to be an All-American, but her 4.0 is from a B in physical education. So I'm all in on the waiving, being able to waive.
But it needs to be across the board.
Yeah.
And so you see where I have a little rub,
Oh, I see.
okay? And I'll give you one other, Spencer, is a little boy who had been sexually abused growing up, and they made him take PE. It destroyed him. Destroyed him.
Okay, so how do we?
And I realize that
Now
I'm talking about a few cases, but there may be more. There may be more, but there may be.
But let's not make the exception the rule. And it's hard because I'm coming from somebody who's in education and I've only seen in 7th and 8th grade, don't say this too loudly, but 7th and 8th grade doesn't count anyway. And so when people go to counselors and say, I need to waive this class, I've talked to many counselors and they waive them. You know, I've never seen a counselor who hasn't waived it if a parent.
But it has happened.
But because it's happening, maybe we just strengthen that language, put it there, so that if you have a situation like that, or situations you're talking about.
Or what if a kid just doesn't want to take PE? They just don't want to.
Well, and if their parent.
I can tell you,
agrees with
Box
it-
Elder School District, after a discussion I had, they allow, we are a parental state, now, whether you like it or you're not. We're a parental choice state, okay? And the fact is that a kid.
Who would actually admit that they don't like that here?
Right.
I'd like to see by a show of hands, who in here would.
Down with the parents.
Whether you like it or not.
Well,
Who
whether
are you?
some systems like it or not, how's that? Whether some systems. But they, when a parent comes in and asks, they never question it, okay? But but still at a school level, that's not always the case.
Well, then how can you make that statement in here in the rule rather than be tied in with the legal mumbo jumbo? Why don't we just make that statement?
Right.
And move on?
Yeah.
I still like the idea of taking the Carnegie units out. It gives people more flexibility with
So
competency
show
based
me.
if they choose to do it, but districts can still do their Carnegie units. They can
Where-
set up everything like they are.
So where is that?
That they, like 2
You didn't
units
get
of
copies.
this.
Oh, okay. Well, we're changing this, Terry. Just for fun.
Good. Okay, Ben is making us a copy of this with lines. So
That's fantastic.
That we're kind of putting off for just a minute, okay? Until, so we.
Ben,
can
are you
talk.
in charge of fixing all these things? Because I have a list of things I'd also like you to fix. That idle-free sign out in the back entrance that somebody thought they should drill into the brick wall.
That's what I thought too. I thought that when I came in.
I am like, who thought through that?
Idle free, and we drilled it into the brick wall.
It's a plastic sign that we have drilled in.
We got important things to talk about, Mayor.
You know,
Sarah?
that person would
Talk to the mayor.
Okay, so is that okay if we can just wait a minute till we do?
Yeah, that's why I was doing small talk.
Thank you, I like it.
Well, then I want to just say, Spencer,
Yeah.
that just because somebody is in cross country, like I played varsity sports as well, but I learned things from PE that were different. Like
Well, then
the
don't tell them
curriculum-
to do that.
That was his point. They told her
Don't
she
have
could
the
go to
cross-country coach from the
Oh,
high
no, that's
school
a different issue.
come and
Yeah,
say,
that's different.
take
No, that's just
PE
weird.
the last, and then I have the teacher's name forever emblazoned in my brain. Yes, I just look for opportunities to be snide.
Is she already in college now?
My daughter's getting her doctorate
Oh,
degree
my
at UT Austin, but it still is a blemish.
Oh, yeah. We have a blemish like that too. The teacher got mad at the whole class and said, "You're all getting C's," and walked out.
See, these are
My son
different
got a C.
issues.
Only C. It happens. It happens.
Yeah. But it's part of this, and I don't know where you put, and I jokingly bring up the idle free sign back here. I don't know where common sense and this comes to, and the spot that we have art hanging up next to the sill, those are actually put on with command strips on a sheetrock wall that could have a nail put in it, right? And could be fixed.
That's because Kathy put
But-
them up.
But the fact of the matter is, there's got to be, you can't, when we write a rule, unfortunately, this rule becomes the, New Testament. And people, it's in the board rule, so we can't do that. And then bad things happen. We need to let people have some common sense here.
And people misinterpret rules. Like without naming the district, I just talked to a district. Oh, I don't want to. 2 days ago, and they were still confused. They thought they had to get rid of it. And I said, no, you should have read the rule. It said, no, we were told we had to. We got a letter from the state saying we had to. And so there's misinterpretation. They said,
first of all, if they got a letter from the state, hasn't been, it's not a rule yet.
Right.
Well,
So that's weird.
But what I'm saying is messages get confused. And
We need to find a district that won't lie to you.
no, they not lying to me.
Well, they said they got a letter from the state.
I'm not gonna go into the details.
Well,
They got a letter from one person at the state.
oh.
So
can I
we
just take that back?
The state need to read the rule.
Well, I suggested, make sure you read the rule, but I'm just saying.
Can we talk about overall just guiding principles while we're waiting for the?
Yeah.
So we've come to the conclusion that we want to put them back in.
Mhm.
We want to give some flexibility. But once again, Brittany's big thing was that she wanted the health component to be required almost, right? That was kind of
And I don't want to trump parents' rights.
right.
Parents can waive,
Yeah.
always. Let's just make that language stronger.
But I understand her
But
point
I do
too.
too, I do too.
Why should they have to wait? There's
But here's
only.
the question.
Jenny, I'm just doing both. I'm just
Here-
playing the devil.
Here's the question. You've got, it is, we had this brought up earlier. You have a group of, you have students whose parents are really involved with the education. And those parents that are really involved understand they can waive. They get that.
Some don't, but yes.
Well, but I mean, by and large, when they're involved, if they don't like that, they march down to the school and say, I don't want, and then this principal says, well, I'm glad you've come in, we can go ahead and waive that. Then you have a group of students who are really bright, whose parents aren't involved with their public education, that I think ought to be able to, I think students ought to be able to waive this.
But it gets into the philosophical question of if parents shouldn't have to waive, then why are we requiring history? They don't get a choice with that? Like, is this really about parent choice? They have to take math.
But do they
That's
still
the
have a
English.
choice with history? I think they do in this state.
But not in this rule.
Well, the only thing,
We're making a hierarchy.
the only
and saying
thing,
history's more important than
and the
ours.
only thing in this,
But it is.
the only thing you have to do in your high school career, no. The only thing you have to do is you have to take that citizenship exam.
Yeah.
Can we talk about that one right now? Because I've taken that as a nationalized citizen. It's a bunch of bunk.
So what if we worked on that statutorily?
Well, that would be a good thing.
That would be a good one to work on.
I don't know how you're gonna pull it off, but I'm all in on working on it. But that's the only thing you can't waive. It's the state, you have to have that test to graduate. When we went through the waiver form, that is an unwaivable requirement.
If you want to graduate.
If you want a diploma.
Well, and something we're not saying is, I don't have children myself, but I care that we have an educated populace, and I care that kids are exposed to art, history, math, health, etc., all the subjects.
With you.
And that matters to me, and I'm a taxpayer too.
But the question becomes, how do you deal with the students whose parents don't even know they got up in the morning and left to go to school? Because there is a large population of that. Whose parents are never going to go down and waive something, who they're just getting by.
But then they're going to get a good education.
Yeah, I understand, but if I don't want to take, if I love art more, and I don't love PE, I want to be able to make sure that they get to do that.
But isn't learning about doing things you don't know through love?
You like PE?
Yeah,
Love
you're killing me over here.
Yeah.
I will always say that we
Yeah.
should do things we don't know about, especially 12 and 13-year-olds. So many kids fall in love at that age with things they have no idea. We've heard story after story.
There's
Yeah.
12 and 13. There's also a.
Okay, it's on board docs now. Diana, will you tell me what's in statute that has to be taught in 7th and 8th grade? What does statute require?
Statute requires English, math, the history, statute basically requires all of the things
Okay,
that are
so
listed here.
there's your difference.
But there's also one more thing I should say. It does require not health, but certain aspects of health in 7th or 8th grade, and then again in high school.
Okay.
So those things happen in the health class, tobacco, alcohol.
Okay, so the ones that we put down as required here are the ones that are required by statute. Okay, and that's kind of our dividing line. Okay, so did you guys find it?
Yeah.
No, I don't.
Page
I
are we
didn't.
on?
So it's revision 1 on board docs.
I have
right?
it revision 1.
Okay. I don't know. We're waiting for Laura to tell us what line number.
I'm not sure, Spencer.
That's the wrong one.
This is one that Brittany put up?
Yes, this is Brittany's. This is revision 1. We need to work from the one that was passed. Yeah. Okay, it's not here yet.
Let's say they're good, but.
So the overarching question is going back to the very beginning.
It's on there.
It's different. It's the wrong one.
It's
Brittany's.
So we want the one with the line numbers.
That's revision.
Yeah. Well, she's looking at the correct one, but without the line number.
Okay, Patty?
Is there anything that the board would like to make, that students should know and be able to do? That is a guarantee that by the time a student graduates, that we feel that they should know and be able to do?
They're not going to get 9 through 12.
Right, that is a competency that we feel they should know and be able to do.
On this list?
Right. So that's kind of the basic bottom line question, whether you're a parent, whether you're a stakeholder, whether you're someone in the community who's paying taxes to say, I think that students should know and be able to do this, that's why I pay taxes, or whatever it is. Is there something on that list that you feel is absolutely should be?
Well, yeah, I think there are some things on that list for me.
Me too.
Do you want to go first?
No, you go.
So I'm looking at elementary education. Actually, let's go down here to high school requirements. Is that what the heading we're under? Or is it the
Middle school.
That would really be awesome when we have line numbers on it. Middle school, okay. I think that language arts is important. I think that mathematics is important. I think that integrated science is important. I believe that United States history and Utah history are important. I put them in a different category than I put the others. I believe that arts education is important. I believe that health education is important. But there's no amount of conversation you can have with me, sorry, that I'm going to say that you have to, that PE is something I believe is something I want you to graduate with. I mean, I could tell you who won the World Series. I went and watched my daughter play tennis. She took doubles champions 3A. I can't tell you today how it scored. And I sat there at the sidelines and watched for 3 years. But I would like to know, I would like students in Utah to know that the Promontory Summit is an important Utah and U.S. history, that the Golden Spike was driven here, which connected the coasts, the continent. So, I mean, I just put it in a different category.
I see your point, Spencer, because it's kind of like, well, this is traditionally what we need to know, and yet I can't remember the details of the article, but there was an article I just read that said for the first time ever, 18-year-olds are exhibiting signs of 60-year-olds because we're not taking care of our bodies. What?
Cheers.
No! PE is not just about knowing the scores for tennis. I love to play sports. I don't watch sports. I don't really care about them there. But it's about taking care of our bodies, which means taking care of our minds. Well, but PE does it too, if you look at the PE standards.
So,
PE standards are big. They're not just about playing the sport.
You've been patient.
I was that child that I did not take PE class. I am
top.
okay.
Stop it, you two.
I am okay. And
you're a
ballerina.
So you're
different. But I didn't learn everything else that was in PE, right? And ballet. Well, now after 5 kids, but I'm, but it's not the detrimental be all end all if they don't take a PE class in 7th and 8th grade. What is who was it? John Adams. And I don't like this quote because I'm going to say it anyways. But and I'm going to mash it because I didn't take time to look it up. But he said, I study, politics and war and everything so that my son can study, arts and all of that, right? Mm-hmm. If we don't study the history, if we don't study the correct history, if we don't study the math, if we don't study the reading, we are going to fall into despotism. We are falling into despotism now because our students believe that socialism right now is the key to the future, to communism. This is not the foundation of the United States, and so we are losing our students based on this. And this civics test, having taken it, I tell you it's a joke. I sat there, I studied, questions that, pick A, B, C, or D, and there was 100 questions, and I could memorize the whole thing. They only asked me 25 of them, and then they said, read this sentence. This is a dog. I'm like, seriously, this is it? Yes, and then write it in English. Write, this is a house in English. And then she says, do you need any more help? I said, are you kidding me? This is a test that is geared towards third world countries. This is a test geared towards third world citizens coming from third world countries to come into our United States that are willing to work hard by themselves and take on the responsibility by themselves of failing or succeeding. That is the American dream. That is what that means. And they do not understand that.
Pull back to
Hold
this.
on. But they don't understand that in the United States history. And so if we're not teaching correct history, but we're focusing on arts and music and everything.
I'm not saying that at all.
I would rather.
History's great.
But they're not even teaching that. And when my son, he's a junior right now, takes, only talks about the Constitution for 2 weeks, maybe talks about the Civil War now, and they're already in mid-19th century, and it's November, and I'm thinking, what U.S. history have you studied? This drives me crazy.
So that we gotta work on that different.
They won't know anything about history.
They don't know anything.
Thank you for raising your hand.
I just want to close the loop. I must study politics and war that my sons may have liberty to study mathematics and philosophy. My sons ought to study mathematics and philosophy, geography, natural history, naval architecture, navigation, commerce, and agriculture in order to give their children a right to study painting, poetry, music, architecture, statuary, tapestry, and porcelain. I thought you liked that. Anyway.
I tell you why I don't. And I told you why. Because
I don't think I'm allowed to speak.
now.
Not yet, Kathy. We know this is going to be a weird.
Now we're focused, and I love arts and I love history. And my daughter, she's taking theatrical productions and in university. I get it. I mean, I raised my kids on this, but if we don't teach the foundational principles, they are voting members of society, and they're not going to know how to form
Patty,
a philosophical.
But I think, Patty, you've asked a really, a foundational question.
Mm-hmm.
What are the things on the list that you feel like you want competency in at graduation?
It's in board docs now?
I think so.
We think
Let's
it's
go.
in board docs. I like that comment, Ben. We think it's in board docs. Ben's getting his steps in today.
I know, that's good.
Here we go.
So exciting, here we go.
I'm failing desperately.
But when you say when a parent has the right, that a parent can opt out of history, I would rather mandate history and the truth of history and mathematics and reading and writing. Those are the basic foundations of education. We need those, right? I mean, we've seen what reading and writing does for cultures, right? Exponentially increases their ability to succeed, right?
It's just the same one, no? Is it?
Yeah, it's just the same one, but now it has numbers.
Okay, so click on it. Jen, thanks for raising your hand. Oh, we're gonna try and get to here.
Go to the third one over. Yeah, that one.
It's the one that says RS 277-700, is that the one?
We're on line 118 now.
Okay, it does.
Okay, so this is really where we are, and if we can bring this back and really focus on what was already passed by the board, but they sent us back to us to have not the whole philosophical discussion again, but to narrow down what we need to bring back to them.
Would it be obnoxious for me to say that we should just repeal this and go back to the way it was?
Well, it doesn't. No, I don't think that that's obnoxious, Spencer, because I would tell you if I thought that you were. I also think that Jenny's comment earlier that something is a brewing and something's got to happen.
With one, I think we can add one line. I think we can add one sentence to the
original
thing, and call it good.
But I still have real strong comments about having the.
She's over there nodding. The PE.
When she
PE
nods,
is nodding.
But I still have a problem with us requiring Carnegie units when we're dealing with competency base out there and giving them option. They can have it or they can't.
Well, let's put that line in.
That's where you would just cross out the units like it is there. You just have grade 7 language arts, grade 8 language arts.
Does anybody want a printed copy?
I do.
Yes, please. Can we add portfolio?
And then we
add, exhibit of portfolio? Can we add?
Well, I think that's probably local. And then the other piece on that is adding the competencies like in revision 1 that we've all seen, that we're not working off that one, that they wanted to have you prove your competency of this. I think that that's putting a lot of burden on a student to prove that they can do PE.
Well, it's somewhat subjective.
It is very subjective.
There's a few extra if anybody in the
Yeah.
You know, I didn't have PE from middle school through high school.
You are so lucky.
Think about how much your life could have been enriched.
Okay, so Patty, could you?
I'm actually, what has happened to me, Jennifer, I'm actually bitter about it. You hear it coming out in my voice.
No,
And it's because I was forced to take it. I didn't want to.
Here's why I couldn't.
Okay.
Because I have a skin condition and I have a disability that couldn't allow me to be as physically active as they wanted me to be. I couldn't meet their demands of requirement of being physically active in the class.
And I was just bitter.
Okay, I'd like to move, that we pull it back in again, and I realize we've been kind of open discussion, but now we have the document to work from. So I think we go to line line 118 and work in this section.
So if we start with 119, the core standards in a general core for middle school students are described in this section. So a student in grade 7-8 is required to, and we have struck out the Carnegie units, complete the courses described in subsection 3 to be properly prescribed for instruction in grades 9-12. So let's start there to be talking about Carnegie units, yes or no. Let's just start with that.
Well, you keep talking about Carnegie units, and I keep looking for the word Carnegie.
Well,
yes, credits.
Credits.
Okay.
Yes. The number of credits, thank you, clarification. So is required to complete the courses described in subsection, which would then lead to a greater flexibility with competency-based, so that it's not based to seat time or 900 hour or whatever we want it to say, but instead they can demonstrate competency in another way. So that was the reason, I'm going back to the committee discussion prior, why those were struck out.
So that was lines
121, earn a minimum of 12
Okay,
units of
all right.
credit.
So we keep that.
Does anyone struggle with that in this group?
It's struck out, and we have the new
Jen,
line.
where do you struggle?
So I'm just making sure, I struggle with it, but I'm open to compromise on this. I just struggle because I don't think 12 and 13 is the time to do competency-based. And I will say this again, that, for example,
Seventh grade, eighth grade.
you can't fast-paced critical thinking. It does require hours. There are some things that you don't just check off. It requires.
But we're not using the term competency-based here.
Right,
We're
but
just not requiring.
when you get rid of the Carnegie credits,
If you come
that
here
opens
though,
it up.
it says grade 7 language arts.
But it doesn't say how long.
No, it doesn't.
So I'm just letting you know, I have issue with
Okay.
that, but I understand and I can be
With
flexible.
demonstration,
Okay.
I mean, if they can show demonstration.
Okay, but
that's
Jenny's
gonna be
willing to
fine.
capitulate for a
I
minute.
am. I
For a
just
minute.
disagree
For a
that you
minute.
can show
But you
competency
could-
on a whole year of English
but
or
you-
any subject.
But you could leave, the compromise could be, you could leave the credits in one of two sections.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So right now it's out of both sections.
Mhm.
You could leave it up in 121 and 122,
That would be
but
nice.
take it out down in 128 through, the others. I mean, I don't know if that's a compromise or
Yeah,
not.
I'm open to it.
What? You don't know how?
Because if you're stating earn a minimum of 12 units, but we don't describe how those units can be earned, then you can't get messy.
Okay, all right.
But thank you for.
Well, I was trying to,
Okay, and then go on to 124.
So with the compromise, we're gonna leave it as is, correct?
right.
It has been struck out in addition to the board requirements described in this section, an LEA board may require students to complete additional units of credit.
I think they can already do that. I don't think we have to have that in board room.
So the following are the grade 7-8 general core requirements. And so we struck out units of credit, so it remains struck out on line 126 and 7, correct? Okay, moving forward, so that we're not repeating ourselves, units of credit is now struck out in the remainder of the document,
Okay, yeah.
right? Okay, so grade 7 language arts, grade 8 language arts, grade 7 mathematics, grade 8 mathematics, grade 7 integrated science, and grade 8 integrated science. Those are also the subjects that are tested according to statute, correct?
Well, and history, it has to be in there as well,
history,
even though
yes,
it's not
thank you.
tested, it's
Yes.
in statute.
So so 7, okay, thank you.
And actually,
So-
science isn't in statute,
Okay, science is not.
But it's
but
required
it's
to
tested, yeah.
Not
Okay.
statute, but it is tested, okay. So all of those
There's a little
remain.
rough.
Okay, moving on to 136 through 145. It's now speaking of individual courses. So the arts, visual, and then it lists what those are. So this is where we're getting into, I think, we could say something that is more, this says the arts 1 unit of credit from the following. It could say 1 course. It could say the arts, physical education 1 course.
Well,
It
Why
could
can't you
say
just
I
say
would
the
just-
art?
I would just be okay underlining all that and adding it back in. I don't,
That's the question.
Yeah.
So,
so right down through 145.
Yes.
So I wanted to just follow up on what you said, why couldn't we just say the arts? I almost think if you're gonna take out the credits, you have to just say the arts, because otherwise it's gonna look like you have to take all
Like
four.
you have to teach all of them. Yeah, I think it needs to say the arts.
But I'm proposing that you just put all that back in with one credit, one units of credit from the following.
Then we can't remove the Carnegie credits.
The Carnegie credit is already gone.
It could still
Well,
be
you can still say this.
Because then the arts is E, and then I and 2 and 3 actually
Yeah.
are then indented as.
Right.
Okay,
All right, that's a good compromise.
And the same with health and college and career readiness, and so all the way
Are a
through,
subset of.
all the way through 145, you just add it all back in,
And take out.
Including the credits.
including the credits.
He wants the credits.
But I have a little rub here, Spencer, with that, and I'll tell you why. Is because here you have a college and career awareness where, you know, I can't remember who said that their students don't.
John Adams.
No, it was Dawn. It was Dawn who said it. That these students might not need to have college and career training, but these students where they teach need it.
But they can be waived, right?
Well, we're gonna have to work on a waiver policy.
Right.
So let's don't bite our heads off. Okay, so I actually really don't want to keep the unit, so I'm.
No,
So
one-
for
one-
clarification purposes, if you go back to 136, it says the arts. And then underneath that, we have I, or 1 through 4, visual arts, music, dance, theater. Those are subsets of the arts, those are courses within it. So we want those listed, but if we list those, we can still get rid of the credits, because those are then courses, which goes back up to.
And then also gives LEAs the choice of which ones
Yes.
they can
So
put
we can
into
get
their
rid of
school.
1 unit of credit and keep the subset underneath E there. And get rid of the numbers. Same
So
with
they'd have to take one of those courses or
Some combination.
some combination of.
So really, they would just be taking the 0.5 instead of the.
That's
That's the reality.
I mean, yeah, I know it's
semester
not.
course versus a year.
Yeah, and so instead of a.
So if you leave the subset, then you need to add media arts, because that was part of the core standards that you adopted, so just so that you're aware
That's
that that would
another
need to be, that would
Right,
need to
that's a
be
great idea.
a 5.
And so it really should be 0.5 unit.
Well, we're not putting
We're
in,
not
putting that in.
Oh,
But we are reducing the requirement from 1 each year or 1 full and 2, because it's realistically.
To
it's
what
gonna
they
be a
want.
half year.
A district could say, we want 1 every year.
They could,
They could require more.
They need to be clear on that.
Okay.
but let's put that line in there
Let's
up at
put
the
it
top.
there.
Let's put it in
as
there then.
5 of the media arts,
At least.
at least.
You can't do 0.5.
Well, I think you should,
Right, so we can't.
I think you should put up here in the, under middle school,
Okay.
I think you should put a line in that says that this is the minimum. I don't know how you say this nicely.
Or just at least.
This is the minimum, but, we acknowledge that LEAs can have greater requirements.
So could we then put the arts at
Complete,
least 1 course?
minimum, right, it
At
could go
least
here,
1 course. instead
Laura,
of-
right
why
up
don't
here.
you just put on line 1 the minimum core standards?
On line 1,
Or, I mean, 119.
119, yes.
The minimum
Yeah.
course.
Minimum course and general
Will
standard.
that accomplish what you want, Spencer?
Yes.
I think so, yeah, if they read it.
The
Yes.
minimum core standards and a general course.
Trying to.
And
Because
then
you're right,
on line 136, are we seeing at least 1 course? Credits
Yeah.
are gone.
Yeah,
Yes?
yeah,
We have to say some, so, okay,
Yes,
at least 1
course.
But we can't say credit, because credit is not it wouldn't add up.
Yeah,
right,
if you got rid of the Carnegie.
Yes, okay, and then on PE, would we say at least 1 course?
yeah,
That's a compromise.
yes,
So, where are you finding these from?
you okay with that?
136
PE
and
fangirl?
141.
Okay.
At least 1 course.
And,
PE,
Same thing on 141?
Yes,
okay,
same
I
thing.
have a caveat here. Is that at least 1 course in 7th and 8th grade or 7th, 8th grade?
it's under 7th and 8th grade.
So how does that say?
Well,
So they have to take PE both years?
No, it says they only have to do one course in 7th
Right.
and 8th grade, which I'm still not okay with, but it's better than it was.
Okay, all right, okay.
Do we want to clarify at least one course during Saturday?
No, no,
No.
we don't want to separate those again.
Because it's dropping both.
Okay,
Okay.
Yes.
and now we're to health. Oh, my health.
On 144, I want to make sure we've captured this, beginning no later than 2018-19 school year, digital literacy is that to be added back in or no? Good?
Okay, but
On
what are we
144,
putting there? What are we putting there?
on 144, you could strike the beginning no later than the
I'd like
2018-19, because by the
I'd
time
like
this
to
rule
invite
is passed, that is what you're talking about. So
Okay.
just put digital literacy,
Just digital literacy?
yeah.
Okay.
So are
And
you,
Okay, but wait a minute. So I'm befuddled for a minute. So you're putting PE back in here and saying at least one course. You're putting health back in here at least one course. You're putting career and tech. So where is the choice for kids to take something different? You're filling a 7th grader's entire course.
No,
because they're
because
actually reducing.
it's reducing because it's 7th and 8th grade, so one course in PE, you maybe take PE in 7th, and then you have an opening in 8th. You don't have to take PE unless you choose it. So it reduces it. Instead of one art, it's really a half credit. I know we're not supposed to talk in credits, but that's
But
basically
you
how
and I
it
get
works.
it, yeah.
So you
Yeah,
can have a
so
person
really
wanting
it
to take
opens
more
up
than
their
you do.
schedule while still making sure in 7th and 8th grade they get one or the other. So 1 and 7, or 8, or both if they like art.
So it gives them an opportunity if they want to take an additional art.
Yes.
Okay,
It
all right.
really does
Okay,
open up
I
their
have to
schedule.
think through
Okay,
this.
no, I'm
So then go to
Okay, but
142.
I have a really hard time with making college and career awareness.
But again, it would only be one class in 7th or 8th.
Is it a full year course?
Most of them are half. I mean, it depends. But they can choose.
Kathy?
Music courses are generally,
A year.
instrumental music courses are generally one full year, so that it's a
But that's okay, because
consistent.
yeah, they took taking that art too.
But visual arts courses are typically a 0.5 with sequential ability to go from one to a more advanced in the second semester. We find that as well in dance and drama.
Yeah.
That they're generally semester courses, but sequential to take a second or third.
Diana?
I just wanted to point out that Wendy is sitting behind you from CTE, and she can answer your
We
questions.
are not
about
talking to Wendy.
But she can answer your question about, is it a half a year or a full year?
Yeah, and sometimes they do a trimester.
May I so that, because it's very linear, can I go back to 142? Because you give 142 to go to 143. So it's 142 health education, one course.
Music.
We're keeping health education, one course.
Okay.
So 143 college and career awareness is now one course. It's only one course. Okay, is it half?
So the way college and career awareness is designed currently is as a year course, but I think it depends, but it's got sections, so I think it depends on, as an LEA awards credit, if you will, on a transcript, what that means is a course based on a semester or a year, I don't know.
I think this is moving actually in a fantastic direction.
So
then they can
yeah.
I want to hear the waiver piece before I say that to you.
We'll
This
get
is
there.
opening up the schedule.
Yeah, this is opening up the skill so that a person can be well-rounded, but yet also specialize if they want
Yeah.
to. So a person could take one arts course, but if they're really into athletics, they could take two, yeah.
But I'm waiting for more opportunity for that parent to opt out of
Okay, so we're gonna have to see the waiver. So let's finish.
So 144 would then be digital literacy, one course. We're getting rid of beginning the later than, and we're saying one course.
Diana.
So we just went through the whole list and said one course in each. Why not just put it up front and say one course in each of the following, including the 2 English and the 2 math and the 2 science? Because since
Okay,
anywhere
that
there's
makes
2, they're
sense.
listed
And then it's
as
simpler.
2, and then it's simpler.
In each
The following are the 7th grade score requirements for course requirements for what?
And then put the must take at least one course of each of the following, and then you just have your whole list.
Why don't we say the grade 7 to 8 general core requirements include at least one course of the fall? Would that work?
And if we do that, Kathy, would that, if we have the E there, that would say the arts, but it could be any of those under there.
E.
The
C,
arts.
A.
It's line 136.
We're looking at the wrong.
No, we're in the.
Right here. Right here, Kathy.
The arts, I got it for
The arts.
So it would say.
The only addition there is that media arts is
No, we're
lower.
putting
You
it
want
in.
to add
But my
media arts.
question is, Diana, if we're putting that at the top end, he can't come from an.
Him over there, so I'll take it over there.
Ben just breathed a sigh of relief.
Do you want to hear the last part or whatever?
No, it's okay.
Do you think I can swap
Yeah, you
it?
can.
Okay.
I just want to know who is more important than us.
Law and licensing. Well, okay.
We have Angie.
Diana, my
Well,
question is, if we
Ben,
put that up there in line 126, about one of each of these courses, and now we have all these listed under visual, under arts, does that mean they have to pick one of each of those?
No.
Because it's a subsection.
It's a subsection.
I think Laura's right. We understand that at the table.
Right.
But when that goes out as a document, in none of the others do you list the separate options that are available. I mean, art is the only one that does that. So why would it need to be there, Kathy?
So because when you say the arts, the misunderstanding is that that's visual art. It's not an inclusive term.
Music, dance, or theater.
So in some, maybe perhaps a suggestion would be to, instead of list them, the arts, parentheses, put include.
Or we could define the arts.
But we're not defining anything else, which might.
Oh, but you could.
Yeah.
You could put it way up front as in the definitions.
Oh, that's right.
That's a good idea.
Okay, but when you read that detail, it can still be.
Then that means, because some schools aren't able to teach dance, they don't have the finance for the teacher, then they could.
Yes.
Okay, so, yeah, we want to take the list out and just put a definition of the arts.
Okay. And then at the very beginning, we could say online. So 119, the minimum course standards, and then we're on 126, the following are the grade 7 general core requirements. At least one course in each of the following areas.
Okay, Ben already had that on there.
Yep.
Okay.
So that's going to be line 126.
They say it is, 'cause this is.
Okay.
Okay.
So now we're on
Well, she's waiting to see.
146. So Angie, do you want to read 146?
Okay, wait a minute. Do we want 146 yet?
I want to talk about.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe.
So to update you on what the committee has decided,
Well, we haven't voted yet.
right, so with what this document that we're going through at this point is getting rid of units of credit, calling it general, or just calling it courses. And then, talking about on 119, the minimum core standards, and then at least one course in each of the following areas, and then we listed out those courses. And now we're on line 146, and so now,
Okay, so go ahead, Patty.
well, do you want to do it?
Yeah, way. So, 146, I wasn't in, but I understand that back in the earlier days of the discussions of this rule, the idea was to make sure that, that LEA provided access to all of these courses.
I don't think we need that anymore, because we've already done it in the previous line.
Just taking it off?
And then,
That's
So
fine.
and LEA conduct informal
Okay.
assessments on a regular basis to ensure continual. I don't think we need to tell them how to assess their kids either.
I don't
Because we've
Okay.
not made a requirement where
Right.
an LEA shall provide remediation. And if they're not already providing remediation, we're already in trouble.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah.
We want that out, right?
Yep.
That's
not necessary.
That's kind of more of a nudge to make sure they're not just taken out of classes.
Right, and not
Oh.
having them take anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, in some ways, I think that's a nod, in some ways to also competency-based education, right? To
Yeah.
make sure that, but, yeah,
Okay.
we'll take all those out.
All right, now, we still have at the bottom here, at least two of the following
So we
arts.
don't need that, right? Well, so we could just say arts, physical education, because we're gonna define.
Oh, this is where we're defining.
Well, no, we'll just say.
Offer by making a course.
Laura?
Yes.
Chair, excuse
We
me.
don't need
You
that.
don't need all of 9.
We don't need all
Because
of
all of
9
9
anymore,
was right.
because of what we
Yep.
changed. I'm thinking, because we were doing that so that they would teach these courses.
Right, now they have to because they're required.
Okay, so all of 9 is gone. And then it goes into the high school requirements, and so then that's our task
Still
force.
want the integration though?
Yeah.
The integrate.
Well, do we have, but do we have all of 9 in there? I mean, this world language thing is down in, on line 175.
I think integration would be dangerous.
You're right, that now you've taken world language out of the conversation. So world language, what the rule that you passed did is require LEAs to teach world languages, which was controversial, by the way. I think you probably heard some testimony about that. And because it's not a required course, there's no requirement for it anymore. It's really going back to what it currently is, the current status.
Yeah, digital literacy, I think. Did you put it up there above?
Yeah.
You put media.
No, it's there.
Media arts.
No, digital is on line
144.
Yeah, 144.
So going back to the beginning, world
Well,
language
it's
is
stricken
not on our notes from
144.
128 through, and now
And
it
it
shows
should
up
be.
here.
Wait,
And so
where?
at least one of the world languages on line 175.
Wait, 175?
No, that's on,
That's gone.
that's gone.
So
We've taken
So
all
are
of
we
9
going at
out.
176, are we also taking out an LEA may integrate one or more of the courses?
My question is, can they already do that?
Sure. But you've taken credits out.
Yeah, I know, but could it count for one of the
Spencer?
courses?
So where are you seeing digital literacy is in there if you take out 9?
Going to be
You take out all of 9.
144.
144, did you decide you were going to unstrike that? You did?
Yes.
Okay, all right. I'm just
Yes.
making sure.
Okay, thank
And
you.
we put media, what was the other one?
We're not gonna list it anymore, we're gonna define what
Up in
arts
the
is.
top?
We're
Okay.
gonna define what arts is, and
And
then
you're
that
gonna
will
make sure that's in
include media, because it is one of our standards. You're okay with that, Kathy? Right? All right, I'm not sure that I want 10 out. I need to think about that.
What line is that?
176.
Can I speak to that?
Yeah.
Yes.
I would like to take that out because that goes along with what I said prior with
Moving health into other courses.
other courses.
Okay. Does everyone else feel better? Okay, I can live with that.
I'm only doing it because the two of them.
You could say except health centers, but
I'm a
let's
big
just leave it
confidant.
all.
You are.
You are leaving it or taking it?
Taking it out.
Taking out. All of 9 is gone.
And 10.
And 10.
Oh, yeah. No, but 9 is the main, it's not what?
Yeah.
11, at the discretion of the LEA board, and the LEA board may
Yes.
offer additional elective courses, require students to complete additional courses, or set minimum course requirements. I think that's important that they
Yeah,
know
I
they
do
can
too.
do that. Okay. Everybody,
So here's where it says they can offer additional elective courses.
yes.
No,
You
she
need to
has
go
to
back?
stay.
Go back.
There's all these other committees.
Go back. I'll make sure it stays here.
Who the hell do they think they are?
The hell? But I think
Right, and that's what I'm saying, is the rest of it, hasn't changed, other than that one change that would be added.
Right.
And on line 356, it's just, some grammar changes on there.
And now we can,
Sorry, at line 69, you can take out the definition of world language because you're not referencing world languages anymore.
Oh, and Carol's gonna be so angry. She's in China, involved with a world language, and we're taking it out.
Well, they can still offer.
That's true.
Okay.
But we have the waiver language.
We need to talk about that.
That's next.
So I don't know where that would go, nor exactly what that should say.
Where do districts get it now? Where do they?
I don't.
Because districts do waive it, but where is it? How do they know they can do that?
That is.
We could have an education.
Yeah.
Here comes Angie.
Yes, good.
Angie.
Yes.
Your
we-
fourth
Sorry.
grade, all your history and stuff, and your.
Sarah, do you know where that is, that language?
I don't know where it is in the language, but remind me, Patty, previously, 7th and 8th grade
Will you come to the
courses.
table, please? Thank you.
7th and 8th grade courses, in some school districts, they have credit, some they do not, correct? All right. That's the answer to your question right there. Because of where the places where there's no credit tied to it, it's easier for, unless they built it into a board approved list, a board approved list of credit, and every school district has their own approved list of credit, that's required. So that's how they waive them. The school counselors would waive them, then they could simply make that, again, they could determine whether it's a half or a full credit, depending on what the state board is required on those kinds of things, or a half or a full year course. So what you've done is create a huge amount of flexibility by what you've been doing here today, which I think for the kids is wonderful. The teachers are going to have tons of questions about this. I can just tell you that right now. Okay, so you're going to have
Less
some.
than before.
Yeah, there's going to be. I think so. I agree with that. Less than before. But so to answer your question is, there's built in for the middle level grades flexibility from the school counselors and
But
the.
where is that legally? Is there somewhere?
I don't know. I don't know where it is legally.
Jenny, ask Angie your question. No, wait, we're talking about waiving a parent being able to come in.
It might have been in the previous rule. I don't think it's in
Is
statute.
it anywhere in a rule?
Is there in
Where
a
do
rule
districts
or
get that authority?
statute?
Well, so there is a language here. Well, I guess the difference is waiving versus, there is, I thought there was a provision that stated that, and, oh, here it is.
Wait, which line?
So, but it's really specific to graduation requirements. It's line
That's right.
339.
It's graduation.
Okay, yes, but
So,
that doesn't mean we can't copy it.
So an LEA may modify graduation requirements for an individual student to achieve an appropriate route to student success. And any student can have a plan for college and career readiness.
Yes.
So most people focus on the IEP, but you see it says if the student's IEP or their plan for college and career readiness has to be maintained in the student's file, include the parent's signature, and maintains the integrity and rigor expected for high school graduation. If you wanted to, we can repeat this language for elementary and junior high. I mean, usually it's the high school courses that matter most, but.
That was the point I was making.
So would you, we can move, actually, we could just move this language, this 24, we could move it into section 3 and just say an LEA may modify course for graduation requirements. Elementary,
Or you could just say courses or. But that isn't really giving a parent.
But it says the parent.
But it says the LEA.
But it just says the
And they
parent's
meet with the
signature.
college.
It doesn't say anything about a waiver.
Do you want it to say something like a parent may request that a student's, so we do 24 the way it is, but we move it, and then we do a subsection B that says a parent may request that an LEA, you know, and have to require that LEA.
But would that go back to your college and career, where's the SEOP part that was
Because in an
crossed out?
SEOP, you
That's
need
what
that.
happened. Using the following criteria consistent with the student's plan for college and career readiness. So that's where it could be modified, is the third plan for college and career readiness. So if we go back to 275.
Yeah, but what about the parents who didn't come to that meeting?
Right.
But I think it really, I think it needs to have, parent needs to have an opportunity to,
Yeah.
so can we?
Well, the parent can request it.
Okay, request, right, request, have that on there.
Does everybody agree that we should just move 24 to be
Yeah.
more general
Yeah.
and not just apply to high school?
And do we want B, C, and D to come in under? Oh, A, B, C, and D are their own independent, right?
Well, B, C, and D are all part of us. So
They're all,
an
are
LEA
all
may,
part of
24. So an LEA may modify and I'm going to put a student's course or graduation requirements to achieve appropriate route to student success. If the modification, think of the A as a 1,
okay,
and B as a 2, C as a 3, and D as a 4. If it 1, it's consistent with either their IEP or their plan for college and career readiness. It's maintained in the file, includes the parent signature, and maintains the integrity and rigor expected.
But it doesn't have to have all of those.
It does. It does right now.
That's a 1,
So
2,
what
3.
is
But then if you have an E, it could be an independent one.
So
with a parent waiver.
well, what I will do, this will become a 24A, then I'll have a whole new B that says, or maybe we'll do it, this will be 4, and we'll do a new 5, because that section's a lot shorter than this one. We'll just put right after that a parent may request a waiver or actually modification might be the better way, it's not a waiver. And a parent may request a modification to a student's course or graduation
So you put it right in the line of 24.
Well, right after.
Okay.
They'll go together.
Okay, all right. I
They're
can
gonna
do that.
They're gonna be right together.
Okay.
You like that?
That's fantastic.
Do you guys want any more direction about that procedure? Do you want me to say that LEAs create a policy on how to do that, or just leave it, just say an out as
They need
a
to be able
parent
to
may?
know how to create a policy, that they need to know how to do that, they can provide parents, because most parents are gonna know this in here.
You're okay. You like better, you got
They need
to.
to notify parents that this is an option.
better than it was. It's better than it was actually.
I want, you know,
There's a lot more flexibility.
Eighth grade.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
They need to be notified of their option.
Will you introduce yourself again, okay?
Holly Todd, School Counseling Program Specialist here at USBE. And I just was clarifying that even a student who is on an IEP, they also have a plan for college and career readiness. Yeah. So
they don't need to be separate?
No. Every student, school counselors support every student, regardless of whether
So
they're
we
on
don't,
an IEP.
yeah, we can take that out.
Okay, great.
And I wonder if we should take that out in the high school one while we're fixing it anyway. As well. Take it out the high school portion of this while it's open.
Yeah, because we're moving that all at the top.
Okay. Thank you, Holly, so much.
See, when the public speaks, how much better the policy ends up.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, aren't we just?
I know everyone sitting here is kind of going, well, I came here so I could speak to this today, but we have to get to nitty gritty, so please be patient, because I'm really trying to have the public speak at these, but
But
we
I
have
think,
been hearing.
but we know, but we've heard from them during the
Yes.
course of this
Process.
taking
Some
effect,
remain
yeah.
patient. So, to committee then, with the changes, I would seek a motion. Are we done? Wait, first, are we done with this?
I am. I'll stay here to vote, because I think if I leave, well, you don't have to have a quorum. do you?
Just stay right here, Spencer. Please.
Just,
I'll get on my knees, but then I never get back up.
I would move that we approve
R277.
R277-100
With
with the changes that have been discussed.
can I
Sure.
On first reading
And,
send to the board.
and on first reading and send to the board
On second and final.
on second and final.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, committee, any discussion to this? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Oh my grief, can we just write this down?
Last meeting I had too much caffeine before I got to the meeting. This time I just had it later on in the meeting.
A little? Okay, I'll take another motion.
What about discussion?
Well, I think everybody is nodding their head.
Can we clap for you guys?
Oh, yes,
Oh.
Leanne.
I think so. Okay. I don't have to come.
Yeah, no, please come to the table.
Okay. Leanne Wood, Education Commissioner for Utah PA, and I'm not allowed to be at the table. Sorry, the chair would come. Just a concern. Has anyone talked to Kim Coleman about the bill that she has, that she's opened the bill file on middle school requirements?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
And do we know,
Well, this might solve it.
was she like this?
I haven't had a discussion with her, so.
Okay.
Well, she's one of 104.
We'll just put that out, but.
Thank you.
Okay, that was it.
Thank you. And
I have one more, we have one more, this is a minor thing, but it's a big deal, it's at the same time.
Come back, Spencer.
We forgot, there's one other small amendment we'd like to get your approval on. It's actually related to high school credit, but it's on lines 304 and 305. Right now, you're required, a student is required to have 2 units of credit. So health, participation school, fitness for life, individual lifetime activities, or team or sport. And it says maximum of up to 0.5 units of credit of the team or sport. But you as a committee actually approved that being up to 1 credit, not just half a credit. So we also need to put maximum of 1 unit of credit.
Well, we went away from calling things.
Except
So
we're
this is
still
high
in
school.
high school.
High school.
High school. So this is one change to the high school credit, but it would allow people to use the team sport or athletic participation up to a full credit, not just half a credit, if we change this 0.5 to 1.
Could that also be for those teams and sports not associated with the high school? Athletic participation.
Okay, but time out for a minute. So now we have participation skills, which is PE, fit for life, which is PE, individual lifetime skills, and team or sports, and we're all saying there that many are required?
Well, it's 2 units of credit from any of the following. It's this whole, it's like what we did with arts, where we list them, you don't have all of them.
Oh, so 13 defines that.
Yes, and so then this can be up to 1.
Okay, let's change that.
Are you okay with
Are
that?
you, Spencer, are you okay with that amendment?
Am I okay with that amendment?
You should be. It's good.
Yes.
Okay. Committee, are you okay with that amendment? I think we should vote on it. All in favor?
You did it already.
We did it.
I know.
Change it in the rule.
I know, but I want to make sure that we do it and it's firm. I don't want to have any questions. So all in favor of adding that to our motion?
Aye.
Thank you. So,
Thank you.
I don't want to have any questions that we did.
Thank you, Jody, for reminding me.
Yeah, and then somebody, you had a comment? you
I
wanted
just
to
want to, hi, I'm Jill Sorensen, I teach physical education and health. So I just want to clarify, like, so arts are separate than PE, right?
Yes.
Okay, and then so it's 1 credit, or 1/2 credit for 7th and 8th.
Course.
One
So
course,
district
sorry.
may do it different than another district.
Oh, 1 course, so if we have trimesters as opposed to semesters, it's
Right,
one.
that's why it's.
Doesn't matter.
Trimester, so it doesn't matter. But it's 1 per 7th and 8th grade.
That we're requiring.
Yeah, they were requiring.
No, not and.
Right, they combine. Yeah.
Right, but a district could require more.
Okay, sounds good.
So go to your local board.
Yeah, the local board.
Now that I've heard PE fangirl talk, can I
Oh.
leave?
Okay, I'll take another motion. Spencer, you can do it.
I move that we adjourn.
All in favor?
Okay.
Aye.